Chapter 1153. Later, I used Ren Duxing's blood to seep into the demonic crystal from that crack and dripped it to recognize me as its master. Originally, I thought that after successfully recognizing me as its master, I could take the demonic crystal away. But I was still too naive. If your ancestor's seal was not removed, there was no way to take it away. Just then you appeared. At first, I didn't have much hope, but I didn't expect that you would actually awaken the purple gold dragon soul in the mermaid clan's holy land. When I saw the purple gold dragon soul, I expected that your bloodline power would awaken sooner or later. So when you entered the land of ruins, I used the identity of Rin Duxing to gain your trust. And you were really stupid. You actually didn't suspect me at all. Mu Tianyang shook his head and laughed. Yes, I was really stupid. Even my own father was not worthy of my trust. And I actually foolishly ran to trust a stranger? I really reaped what I sowed. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed at himself. But suddenly, his eyes trembled, dripping blood to recognize him as its master. Since the demonic crystal was his ancestor's, then there should be a blood contract with his ancestor. How could Mu Tianyang succeed in recognizing him as its master? Could it be that his ancestor had already passed away? No, his ancestor's strength was exceedingly high. No one could kill him, but how could he explain the blood contract? However, just as he was letting his imagination run wild, he realized a very serious problem. That was the mermaid clan's holy land. He looked at Mu Tianyang in surprise and said, "How did you know that my purple gold dragon soul was awakened in the mermaid clan's holy land?" Mu Tianyang smiled and said, "Do you still remember the valley in the Death Desert?" Valley? Qin Feiyang frowned and asked, "Is it the valley that suddenly disappeared?" "Yes." Mu Tianyang nodded. Qin Feiyang's heart sank and said, "So the skeleton at the bottom of the lake was really your skeleton?" "Wrong. It's not a skeleton, it's a god skeleton." Mu Tianyang smiled proudly. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, "Whatever you say, I just want to know the truth." "All right, I'll tell you the truth. At that time, you looked at my divine bone and tried everything to take it away. In the end, you accidentally cut your finger, and some blood flowed out. Your blood has been absorbed by my godly bones. It was at that time that I learned that you were a descendant of Qin Batian, because I am too familiar with the power of his bloodline." Mu Tianyang said. Qin Feiyang said in surprise, "You were already awake at that time." "That's right. At that time, I had already successfully possessed the body. When I sensed the bloodline power coming from the divine bone, I immediately left this place and headed to the desert of death. Originally, when I saw you take away the pill scripture and my 6 ribs, I was quite angry. However, after thinking about it, you actually had the ability to sever my divine bones. You must be extraordinary. Then I followed you in the dark and observed you. So whether you went to the Merfolk clan or what happened there, I know all about it, including that little girlfriend of yours." Mu Tianyang laughed. Qin Feiyang clenched his hands tightly and asked, "Then why didn't you take back your ribs and the pill scripture?" "First, you need to grow, and these things can help you grow faster. Second, your tragic background. When I learned about your background and situation, I felt that we could work together. Actually, I was training you," Mu Tianyang said. "Training?" Qin Feiyang sneered and said, "Do you think there is a possibility of us working together?" "Of course there is. My goal is revenge, and so is yours. And the target of our revenge is the great Qin Empire. Why can't we work together? I also believe that as long as the two of us work together, with your ability and my foundation, we will be able to kill our enemies and wash away the shame in less than 10 years. Mu Tianyang said, his eyes full of killing intent. Qin Feiyang frowned. He didn't expect Mu Tianyang to have such a plan. Seeing that Qin Feiyang didn't speak for a long time, the man in white smiled and said, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend. You are a smart person. You should know what to choose without us saying more. Qin Feiyang looked at the man in white and said, "Who are you?" The man in white smiled and took a facial restoration pill. His appearance immediately began to change. Soon, a familiar face appeared in Qin Feiyang's sight. "It's you." Qin Feiyang's eyes widened as he looked at him in disbelief. The person in front of him was actually Zhang Jin. He was extremely clear about Zhang Jin's talent and cultivation, but he had already stepped into the War King? Are you surprised? A once mediocre and unknown piece of trash has actually surpassed a peerless monster like you. All of this was bestowed upon me by the Lord. Zhang Jin looked at Mu Tianyang with eyes full of worship. Qin Feiyang shouted, "Now that you have followed him, you have indeed been reborn. But aren't you afraid of being infamy for 10,000 years? Haha. As long as I can destroy the great Qin Empire, I don't care even if I am infamy for 10,000 years." Zhang Jin laughed out loud, his eyes filled with hatred. "Sigh, I saw Zhang Ren's death with my own eyes. I admit that the sacred temple has let you down. It's understandable that you hate all of this. However, you shouldn't have forced this hatred onto those innocent people. You must know that to destroy the great Qin Empire, it's not enough to just kill the emperor. It will also implicate countless living beings. At that time, it will definitely be a disaster and blood will flow like a river." Qin Feiyang sighed. Zhang Jin said, "Then I would like to ask you, don't you hate it?" Qin Feiyang nodded. "I hate it, but I will not be Mu Tianyang's lackey and help him do those evil things. I will use my own ability to wash away the shame. You have talent and potential. No matter where you go, there will be people helping you. Of course, you dare to say such things. But me? I have nothing, so I can only choose this path. I won't regret it. An empire without fairness, justice, and justice should be destroyed." Zhang Jin said, "Is there fairness, justice, and justice in the Heavenly Sun Empire? If there is, my ancestor wouldn't have overthrown the Heavenly Sun Empire." Qin Feiyang snorted coldly. Zhang Jin shook his head. "I don't know what the Heavenly Sun Empire is like. I only know what I should do now." "You're being stubborn." Qin Feiyang shouted angrily. "You are the one who is stubborn. Look at you. You were originally a genius, but what happened in the end? Your cultivation was crippled. You were expelled from the imperial capital, and you even implicated your mother. Yet, you still continue to protect the great Qin Empire. Are you a fool?" Zhang Jin sneered. Qin Feiyang fell silent. After a long time, he said, "One cannot forget one's roots." Chapter 1154. Lord, let's get rid of him. This kid's potential is too terrifying. If we don't get rid of him soon, he will become our biggest obstacle in the future. Yes, let's take this opportunity to kill him in the cradle. The Holy Eagle, Holy Lion, and Holy Python didn't hide their killing intent towards Qin Feiyang. Mu Tianyang glanced at Zhang Jin and the three holy beasts before looking at Qin Feiyang. "Are you really unwilling to cooperate?" Qin Feiyang shook his head. Seeing Qin Feiyang shake his head, Zhang Jin and the three holy beasts immediately surrounded Qin Feiyang, with killing intent surging in their eyes. Mu Tianyang waved his hand at them and looked at Qin Feiyang with a smile. "It doesn't matter. There will be plenty of time in the future. I believe you will figure it out sooner or later." "Lord!" Zhang Jin and the three holy beasts were anxious. If they didn't get rid of Qin Feiyang now, it would be the same as letting a tiger return to the mountain. Mu Tianyang's face turned cold as he said expressionlessly, "Say no more. I have already made up my mind. In addition, no one is allowed to harm him without my orders." Zhang Jin and the three holy beasts looked at each other and could only lower their heads, helplessly. "What do you mean?" Qin Feiyang looked at Mu Tianyang with a gloomy expression. Now that the Devil Crystal Seal was broken, Mu Tianyang was free and he had lost his value. So why didn't Mu Tianyang kill him? Do you really not understand what I mean? Mu Tianyang asked. Qin Feiyang frowned. But suddenly his eyes lit up and he said in a low voice, I understand. To you, destroying the great Qin Empire no longer brings you much joy. What you need to do is to let me help you destroy the great Qin Empire. Yes, if I do it myself, first, I don't have the ability to do so. After all, my cultivation hasn't recovered to its peak. Second, it's too boring. The great Qin Empire is Qin Baishan's blood, sweat, and tears. If I were to destroy it, I would only feel happy because we are enemies. But you are different. You are his descendant. Think about it. If he were to find out that the great Qin Empire that he personally founded was destroyed by his own descendants in the end, how would he react? He'll probably jump out of his coffin in anger. Mu Tianyang teased. Qin Feiyang clenched his fists and said word by word, This kind of thing will never happen. I also believe that the ancestor is still alive and will come back sooner or later. Don't speak so soon. Mu Tianyang shook his head with a smile and said, All right, I still have things to do, so I won't play with you anymore. Let's go. After he finished speaking, he took a step forward and flashed towards the passageway. Zhang Jin and the three holy beasts glanced at Qin Feiyang and followed after him. Wait, Qin Feiyang shouted. Is there anything else? Mu Tianyang stopped and asked. Qin Feiyang said, Since you have already escaped, why didn't your consciousness return to your body and still occupy Renduxing's body? Because I want to become stronger. Mu Tianyang whispered, his eyes shining brightly, and then he left without looking back. Qin Feiyang didn't stop him, because he couldn't stop it. Dong Qing and Zhang Jin both hid their cultivation, so the cultivation of Mu Tianyang and the three holy beasts was definitely not as simple as it seemed on the surface. Moreover, just a wisp of Mu Tianyang's consciousness was not something he could match. A god was a god after all. It was not something a mortal like him could shake, but he was confident that sooner or later he would also take that step. Not good. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's face changed. He used phantom steps and rushed towards the passageway. Now, Yan Wei, Wolf King, Viper, and Dan Wangkai were still fighting outside. Mu Tianyang would let him go, but he might not let Yan Wei and the others go. So, he had to rush to the rescue as soon as possible. Bastard! The moment Qin Feiyang rushed out of the passageway, his face suddenly turned pale. Dong Qing and the holy monkey were gone. Mu Tianyang and the others also disappeared. The storm above the canyon was also gone. Only corpses and blood were left on the ground. Wolf King, Yan Wei, Viper, and Dan Wangkai were also lying in a pool of blood, revealing little life fluctuations. Qin Feiyang hurriedly flew over and checked them one by one. Whether it was Wolf King, Yan Wei, or the other two, their qi was destroyed, and there was a bloody hole in their lower abdomen, blood spurting out like a column. Moreover, their sea of consciousness was also broken. If he had come a little later, he would have died. Qin Feiyang hurriedly took them into the castle. Seeing Qin Feiyang appear, Lu Hong and the others immediately rushed up, their faces full of concern. Help me take care of them. Putting down Yan Wei and the others, Qin Feiyang said to Lu Hong and the others in a low voice, then walked to the alchemy furnace and opened it to refine pills. The qi and sea of consciousness of Yan Wei and the others were too seriously injured. So serious that even the spirit sea pill and essence soul pill with 5 elixir veins may not be able to repair them. So, he wanted to refine the spirit sea pill and essence soul pill with 7 elixir veins. After a while, 4 spirit sea pills and essence soul pills came out. Lu Hong immediately took the pills and gave them to Yan Wei and the others one by one. Their situation gradually stabilized. Qin Feiyang refined 4 healing pills with 7 elixir veins and gave them to them. Seeing that their injuries had not only stabilized, but were also slowly improving, Qin Feiyang heaved a sigh of relief. Lu Hong wiped the sweat on her forehead, got up and looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Mu Tianyang didn't kill them, but only seriously injured them, which shows that he cares about you. Qin Feiyang sneered, That's because I'm valuable. If I wasn't, I'm afraid I would have been smashed to pieces. Then what are you going to do next? Mu Tianyang is now really out of trouble, and he has the magic crystal in his hand. This is not a small matter. Should we inform the people in the capital? Lu Hong's face was full of worry. Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, Do you think they will believe me? Whether they believe it or not is their business. We just have to have a clear conscience. Besides, we are not doing this for them, but for the billions of people in the great Qin Empire. Are you able to watch as they die miserably at Mu Tianyang's hands? Lu Hong said. Qin Feiyang looked at her and nodded. Okay, I'll listen to you. Whoosh! After that, he left the castle alone and stood above the canyon, scanning the sea of corpses below. The blackstone ape, fire dragon, lion, winged sand python, and snow eagle were all killed by the wolf king and viper. The corpses of the monkey king and the other beast kings were also there. It was like a scene from hell, making one's scalp tingle. I can't accept it, Qin Feiyang whispered. He had suffered a lot in the past, but it was the first time he suffered such a big loss. What he was most unwilling to accept was that, from the beginning to the end, he had been living in someone else's scheme. Although the storm in the ruins had disappeared, the dark clouds had not dispersed, and Qin Feiyang's mood was very heavy at the moment. Whoosh! He flew into the sky and directly flew out of the canyon, standing above the iron chain bridge and looking in all directions. Gravity had also disappeared. However, this place was already devoid of life. It had become a true land of death. Where will he go? At this moment, Qin Feiyang had no clue. Before leaving, Mu Tianyang said that he had business to do, and this so-called business was definitely not a small matter. But Mu Tianyang was too unpredictable, and he really couldn't figure it out. I'll go to the capital first. Chapter 1156. Butterfly Valley. Qin Feiyang's face darkened as soon as he appeared. There was a huge crater in the sea of flowers below. At the bottom of the crater, a muscular man in golden armor was lying, covered in blood. Qin Feiyang stepped forward and landed beside the muscular man in golden armor. He bent down and reached out to feel the man's pulse. The muscular man in golden armor was dead. Judging from the wounds on his body, he died not long ago. Who did this? Qin Feiyang murmured as he stood up and looked at the muscular man in golden armor. He was very familiar with the armor on the muscular man in golden armor. It was the uniform of the commander of the Invincible Black Army. This meant that this man should be the new commander of the Invincible Black Army. But how did he die here? As the commander of the Invincible Black Army, he should be quite powerful. Who in the spiritual state had the ability to kill him? Could it be, suddenly, Qin Feiyang seemed to have thought of something. His eyes trembled slightly, and he quickly turned into a stream of light and flew toward a forest. The entrance to the secret chamber was here. Qin Feiyang was familiar with the place and quickly entered the secret chamber. There was no one in the secret chamber. He stood in front of the altar, his eyes flickering. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and his battle aura gushed out and flowed into the teleportation altar. Buzz! A moment later, the teleportation altar was activated and emitted a bright, bloody light. Qin Feiyang stepped into the portal. The next moment, he appeared above an ice lake. That's right. He came to the Forgotten Continent again. He suspected that the person who killed the muscular man in golden armor was Mu Tianyang. He originally wanted to go to the imperial capital, but he was worried that Mu Tianyang would come to the Forgotten Continent. Mu Tianyang admitted that he couldn't shake the great Qin Empire with his current strength. Therefore, he thought that Mu Tianyang wouldn't enter the imperial capital rashly. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang dove down, and with a cracking sound, the ice on the lake broke, and he plunged into the lake. At the same time, at the peak of a giant mountain in the central divine kingdom, a purple-clothed youth sat cross-legged on the ground, his eyes glowing with a hazy luster. Suddenly, in his bright eyes, a glacier and snowy land appeared. A young man in a white robe was entering an ice lake below. This white-clothed youth was none other than Qin Feiyang. The scene in the purple-clothed young man's eyes froze at this moment. "You're finally back." The moment the image froze, the purple-clothed young man suddenly stood up, a bone-piercing cold light shooting out from his eyes. Immediately after, he opened a teleportation gate and walked in. Ice Lake. A huge snow python was lying at the bottom of the lake, taking a nap with its eyes closed. At this moment, Qin Feiyang was standing in front of the snow python's head. With respect in his eyes, he cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, Senior." The snow python slowly opened its eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang. It asked suspiciously, "Why are you here again?" Qin Feiyang said, "Junior came to ask before Junior came. Did anyone else enter the Forgotten Continent?" "No." The snow python shook its head and asked in confusion, "Why do you ask?" "No." Qin Feiyang frowned. From the snow python's attitude towards him before, the snow python shouldn't lie to him. But other than the Forgotten Continent, where would Mu Tianyang go? Could it be that he really went to the imperial capital? Or could it be that he had guessed wrongly from the beginning? The person who killed the golden-armored man wasn't Mu Tianyang at all? The snow python looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously and asked, "Did you encounter some trouble?" Qin Feiyang said, "I wonder if Senior has heard of Mu Tianyang." Mu Tianyang. The snow python's pupils constricted, and it nodded. "The emperor of the Tianyang Empire, of course I know." "He's back," Qin Feiyang said word by word. "What?" The snow python's expression suddenly changed. "Qin Feiyang, I know you're down there. Get out quickly." At this moment, an angry shout sounded from above. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and looked at the snow python. "Senior, I'm sorry, I'm going to meet an old friend." The snow python nodded absent-mindedly, as if it was thinking about something. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang broke through the waves and flew out of the ice lake. He saw a familiar figure standing in the void above. Who else could it be but Mu Qing? When enemies meet, their eyes turn red. At this moment, Mu Qing clenched his fists and his eyes turned red. He couldn't wait to tear out Qin Feiyang's tendons, peel off his skin, and crush his bones into ashes. Qin Feiyang glanced at him indifferently and then looked around. Mu Qing said, "Don't look around. I haven't had time to inform Father and the others. You dare to come to me alone?" Qin Feiyang was surprised. "Why not? I don't believe that you dare to kill me." Mu Qing retorted sarcastically. Before his voice died away, Qin Feiyang took a step forward and landed in front of Mu Qing in an instant. He grabbed Mu Qing's neck and sneered, "Who gave you the confidence?" However, Mu Qing was not afraid. Instead, he asked with a mocking expression, "Mu Tianyang is back, right?" "How do you know?" Qin Feiyang's expression changed. Mu Qing said, "Although I'm not in the great Qin Empire, I can sense everything about Mu Tianyang." "You can sense it?" Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. Mu Qing said, "Haven't you always wanted to know the origin of the Mu family? Now I'll tell you. The Mu family is the descendant of Mu Tianyang." Sure enough, Qin Feiyang's heart trembled. He had thought of this a long time ago. However, he did not dare to make a conclusion because he could not find any conclusive evidence. "I know where my ancestor is now and what he's going to do next. If you kill me now, no one will tell you this. At that time, you'll be like a headless fly, running around the world without any harvest. Don't think of using the slave seal to control me. I'm not Yen Wei and the rest. Threats and promises won't work on me at all." Mu Qing sneered. Qin Feiyang's face was as dark as water. Indeed, If it was someone else, he had many ways to make the other party speak the truth. However, he was not confident about Mu Qing. Qin Feiyong said, "What do you want?" "Divine crystals and the space-time gate." Mu Qing said in a deep voice. "Space-time gate?" Qin Feiyong frowned. What did he mean? Wasn't the space-time gate in the hands of the Mu family? Why did he ask him for it now? Looking at Qin Feiyong's expression, the anger in Mu Qing's heart could not be suppressed. He shouted, "Don't play dumb with me." Qin Feiyong said, "Why should I play dumb? Tell me clearly." Mu Qing said in a deep voice, "Do you remember that day when you escaped from the inland sea and wanted to return to the great Qin Empire? My ancestor chased you here." "I remember." Qin Feiyong nodded. "It was at that time that the space-time gate in my ancestor's hands was snatched away by the damned snow python under the ice lake. You were there at that time, and you still say that you don't know?" Mu Qing roared through voice transmission. Qin Feiyong was stunned. There was such a thing? This did exist, but because it happened after he left, he only knew about it now. Qin Feiyong asked, "Is it the real space-time gate?" "What do you think?" Mu Qing said angrily. If it was just the fake space-time gate, he would not be so anxious. "Ha!" Qin Feiyong laughed. This was really something to be happy about. Seeing Qin Feiyong laughing at his misfortune, Mu Qing's face became more and more ugly. "Don't think about the space-time gate, because I don't have the ability to get it back from her. As for the divine crystal, it's not in my hands now. If you have the ability, go and ask the mysterious madam for it." Qin Feiyong said lightly. Mu Qing shouted, "All of this happened because of you. Shouldn't you be responsible?" "Responsible? Are you kidding me?" Qin Feiyong's face turned red. Wasn't this too funny? Such a smart and capable person actually said such a childish thing at this moment. It could also be seen how helpless Mu Qing was now. Suddenly, Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed, and he asked, "Did you just come from the Central Divine Kingdom?" Mu Qing nodded instinctively, but as soon as he nodded, a strong sense of uneasiness rose in his heart. He looked at Qin Feiyong warily and said, "What do you want to do?" The space-time gate was stolen. Everyone in the Mu family must be very sad, right? So, the fake space-time gate on you can't be kept. Qin Feiyong said with a smile. Mu Qing's eyelids twitched, and he said in a deep voice, "Why? Haven't you heard of the saying that seeing an object hurts the feelings? Seeing the fake space-time gate, you will definitely remember the real space-time gate. So why don't you give it to me? I promise you that I will cherish it." Qin Feiyong smiled mockingly and snatched Mu Qing's chinquan bag. Taking advantage of people's difficulties. Shameless, despicable, despicable. Mu Qing cursed angrily. "I'm doing this for your own good. Why can't you understand?" Qin Feiyong shook his head and sighed. Then he sank his mind into the chinquan bag, but he didn't find the space-time gate inside. He frowned and looked at Mu Qing's lower abdomen. Although the fake space-time gate was only a divine artifact, in terms of practicality, it was not inferior to some divine artifacts. Such an important thing should be in Mu Qing's Sea of Qi. Looking at Qin Feiyong's fiery eyes, Mu Qing panicked. Puff! But Qin Feiyong didn't show any mercy. His big hand was like a blade, directly tearing the flesh on Mu Qing's lower abdomen. He reached into his Sea of Qi and grabbed the fake space-time gate. "I won't let you have your way, even if I die." Mu Qing was desperate and wanted to destroy the space-time gate. But would Qin Feiyong give him the chance? Obviously not. Battle Qi surged in his palm, instantly erasing the blood contract in the space-time gate. Then he quickly dripped his blood to make it recognize him as its master. After successfully recognizing him as its master, Qin Feiyong sized up the space-time gate. Then he looked at Mu Qing and said with a smile, "You sent me a treasure from afar. How do you think I should thank you?" These words were too sarcastic and infuriating. Mu Qing spat out a mouthful of old blood on the spot. Don't be like this. I'll definitely repay you well. Qin Feiyang smiled mockingly. With a wave of his hand, he sent Mu Qing to the ancient castle. He was worried that he couldn't find a bargaining chip to fight against the Mu family. He didn't expect Mu Qing to deliver himself to his doorstep. In the past, he didn't do anything to Mu Qing because he had a lot of concerns, so he had to think twice before he acted. But now, he had done what he promised the mysterious madam. The main tower had completely fallen out with her. What else did he have to worry about? Nothing. Chapter 11:57. After putting away the space-time gate, Qin Feiyang took out the image crystal. Buzz. After a while, a familiar face appeared. It was Wang Zicheng. Yes, Wang Zicheng was about to bow. Qin Feiyang reached out and stopped him. Seeing this, Wang Zicheng looked suspicious. Wait a minute. After saying this, Qin Feiyang turned off the image crystal and entered the ancient castle. Immediately, he saw Mu Qing lying on the ground, wailing in agony. Her entire body was stained with blood. Fatso was wantonly torturing him. Seeing Qin Feiyang appear, Mu Qing immediately roared, Qin Feiyang, you let them do this to me. Aren't you afraid that after I escape, I will find someone to kill all of you? If you really had the ability, we wouldn't have escaped from the inland sea. Besides, now that you have fallen into our hands, do you still want to escape? Are you dreaming? Fatso said disdainfully. Mu Qing roared, that's because you are lucky. Good luck won't follow you all your life. Qin Feiyang glanced at him and said lightly, okay, knock him out. Okay. Fatso nodded and slapped Mu Qing on the back of his head. Mu Qing fainted on the spot. Qin Feiyang sent a message to Wang Zicheng again. So far, except for the mysterious lady and the other two, no one knew about his relationship with the 10 heroes of Qinghai. So now, he couldn't let Mu Qing hear his conversation with Wang Zicheng, because it was related to the lives of Wang Zicheng and others. If Mu Qing really escaped, he would definitely find ways to take revenge on him. Then Wang Zicheng and others would be doomed. Greetings, young master. After Wang Zicheng's virtual image appeared, he glanced at Fatso and others, and then reluctantly bowed to Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang didn't care. He asked with a smile, how are you recently? It's all right. Wang Zicheng nodded and asked, what about you? It's all right. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Wang Zicheng continued, right, there's something that the black monkey and I can't decide on, so we need to ask for your opinion. Speak. Qin Feiyang said. Wang Zicheng said, some time ago, Gongsun Bei came to Qinghai to find us. Before Wang Zicheng could finish, Fatso frowned and asked, why is he looking for you? Wang Zicheng said, he wants us to join the main pagoda and become its disciples. What? Qin Feiyang and the others looked at each other. What the main tower values is nothing more than our talent and potential. They want to recruit us for their own use. To be precise, he wants to nurture us so that we can fight against you. After all, in the younger generation of the Forgotten Continent, there is no one who can compete with you. Wang Zicheng looked at Qin Feiyang and said, I see. Qin Feiyang suddenly understood and asked, then what do you think? Aren't you the one who calls the shots now? What else do we dare to think? Wang Zicheng pouted. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled, then lowered his head and pondered. After a while, his eyes flashed, and he looked up at Wang Zicheng and said, I agree that you all should join the main tower. What? Fatso and the others looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, they want to help me nurture talents. Of course, I'm happy to do so. Understood. The Qinghai 10 heroes are all our people. The main tower nurtures them, which is the same as helping us nurture them. Boss, you're really treacherous. Fatso said with a sinister smile. Treacherous indeed. Wang Zicheng also had a look of disdain. Qin Feiyang shook his head and looked at Wang Zicheng, saying, "Since we're going to put on a show, let's go all the way. From now on, you have to treat me as an enemy." "Got it." Wang Zicheng nodded. "Also, about Dan Wangkai and Viper, if Gongsun Bei asks about them, just say that they're missing," Qin Feiyang said. "Okay." Wang Zicheng nodded and asked, "Is there anything else?" "No, you all have to be careful," Qin Feiyang exhorted, and then turned off the image crystal. Fatso looked at Yan Wei and the others lying on the side and said in a deep voice, "Boss, we can't be so passive anymore." "Never again. Mu Tianyang, the Mu family, the main tower, the great Qin Empire. This is a game. And from this moment on, I'm no longer a chess piece. I'm going to become a chess player in this game. Although I don't have the ability to compete with them now, sooner or later, I'll make them all surrender at my feet and tremble in fear." Qin Feiyang clenched his fists, and his eyes emitted an aggressive light. Fatso and the others looked at each other and remained silent. However, those incomparably resolute gazes represented their undying hearts. Qin Feiyang looked at Yan Wei and the others and Wolf King, and said to Lu Hong, "Take care of them. When they wake up, inform me immediately." Lu Hong nodded. Qin Feiyang looked at Fatso and said, "I must know Mu Tianyang's next plan, so no matter what method you use, you have to make Mu Qing speak for me." "Understood." Fatso smiled coldly. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang flashed and left the castle. He found the snow python again and said, "Senior, how much do you know about Mu Tianyang?" "More or less. I know a little about it. But regarding his matters, don't look for me. Because, as long as he doesn't enter the Forgotten Continent, I won't ask." The snow python said lightly, "Understood. Junior will take his leave." Qin Feiyang bowed and saluted. Then he opened the secret door. The snow python frowned and said, "You're leaving just like that?" "Huh." Qin Feiyang looked at her puzzled. The snow python said, "Leave the Mu family's boy here." This, Qin Feiyang was stunned. The snow python said, "Last time when I wasn't paying attention, you took away Yan Wei, and I didn't pursue it. Now you want to take away the Mu family's boy. Do you think I'm really easy to talk to?" "No, no." Qin Feiyang waved his hand again and again. "Let me tell you, this time there is no discussion. If you don't hand him over, don't think about going back." The snow python released its aura, shook off Qin Feiyang, and then closed the secret door with a bang, and then used its huge body to block the door. This time, Qin Feiyang was stunned. Looking at the snow python's attitude, he really didn't know what to do. "Senior, this Mu Qing is very useful to Junior. Can you be merciful and make an exception?" After thinking for a while, he could only think of this method, coaxing and pestering. "No." The snow python shook its head. Qin Feiyang helplessly said, "Then what do you want me to do?" The snow python angrily said, "You still want to bribe me. Don't you understand my words?" Qin Feiyang smiled. The snow python frowned. "Look at you. Today you must take him away. In front of you. Junior doesn't dare to say this." Qin Feiyang rubbed his head and said with a smile, looking silly, Okay. Don't put on an act. You can take him away, but leave your purple gold dragon blood." The snow python impatiently said, "Purple gold dragon blood?" Qin Feiyang was stunned and said happily, "No problem, it's a small matter." Then he waved his hand and a battle chi boundary appeared, separating the lake water, and then he cut his finger. The snow python playfully said, "I want more than one drop." "You can have as much as you want." Qin Feiyang waved his hand indifferently. He had a forthright look on his face. Anyway, he had plenty of purple gold dragon blood in his body. "Don't regret it." The snow python laughed, and a light flashed in front of it, and a crystal clear jade appeared. The jade was about the size of a bucket, and there was no flaw on it, as if it was made by nature. Seeing this jade, Qin Feiyang's eyes almost popped out. The snow python said, "Fill it up." "What, Qin Feiyong was dumbfounded and stammered, "Senior, are you sure you're not joking?" The snow python said, "Do I look like I'm joking? But it's too big. Even if I drain all my blood, it won't be enough." Qin Feiyong put on a long face, feeling extremely wronged. The snow python said with a smile, "It's okay, take your time. Anyway, I have plenty of time." Qin Feiyong cried. However, he had to take Mu Qing away. After all, the snow python in front of him was an existence that could even suppress a fake god. He gritted his teeth, took out the Chang Shui, and cut his wrist. The purple-gold dragon blood immediately surged out. But in less than a tenth of it, he began to feel dizzy. He had no choice but to heal the wound on his wrist and enter the castle to refine the blood coagulation pill. Like the life blood pill, the blood coagulation pill could quickly restore the lost blood. And the effect of the blood coagulation pill was better than that of the life blood pill. In addition, it had 7 elixir veins. In less than an hour, Qin Feiyong's lost blood was restored. Time flew. When it was dark, the jade ware in front of him was finally full. Qin Feiyong healed his wound and looked at the big bucket full of purple-gold dragon blood. He couldn't help but feel pained. Then he looked up at the snow python and said, "Is this enough?" "Yes, let's go." The snow python didn't make things difficult for Qin Feiyong anymore. It simply let Qin Feiyong go. Qin Feiyong hesitated for a moment and said, "Can I ask, what do you want my blood for?" The snow python frowned. Qin Feiyong shrank his neck and left sensibly. After a while, Qin Feiyong once again arrived in the sky above the Butterfly Valley. He took a blood coagulation pill and looked around. Night fell and cold air filled the air. This place was quiet. Looking at the dim mountains and rivers, Qin Feiyong's eyes were confused. Buzz! After an unknown period of time, the image crystal in his arms rang. When Qin Feiyong took it out, Lu Hong's shadow appeared and said, "Awake." Qin Feiyong was refreshed and entered the castle. Yan Wei, Wolf King, Viper, and Dan Wonkai had all woken up. At this moment, they were leaning against the wall weakly. Qin Feiyong asked, "When Mu Tianyang left, did he say anything to you?" Yan Wei shook his head. Mu Qing, who was beaten black and blue by Fatso, sneered, "If I don't say it, you'll never guess." "Shut up." Fatso slapped Mu Qing, and another bloody palm print appeared on her face. Qin Feiyong turned to Mu Qing and raised his eyebrows slightly. He looked at Fatso and asked, "He still won't say it?" "Fat Lord has tried everything, but this guy just won't say anything. Fat Lord is almost at his wit's end." Chapter 1158. Qin Feiyong's gaze turned cold, his hands forming a seal in front of his chest, and an enslavement seal quickly appeared. Whoosh! Following closely, the enslavement seal entered Mu Qing's sea of consciousness. Ah! The intense pain caused Mu Qing to howl miserably. When the pain disappeared, Mu Qing's face was slightly sinister, and he looked at Qin Feiyong mockingly, saying, "I've already told you this is useless to me." "I don't expect you to tell me now," Qin Feiyong said indifferently, and then left the ancient castle with Wolf King, appearing beside the golden armored man's corpse. Qin Feiyong said, "Smell it. Do you have the aura of Mu Tianyang and the others?" Wolf King lowered his head and sniffed carefully. A moment later, its eyes lit up as it looked at Qin Feiyong and said, "Although a long time has passed and the smell has almost dissipated, I can still smell the smell of that damn monkey." Qin Feiyong's face darkened and said, "So they really did it. What do we do now?" Wolf King asked. Qin Feiyong said, "They didn't go to the Forgotten Continent, so they should have gone to the imperial capital." "Impossible. The Spirit Pagoda is overseen by Old Man Qin. With Mu Tianyang's current strength, running there is simply courting death." Wolf King said, "But don't forget, Mu Tianyang used to be a war god who could contend against the ancestor. Even if his cultivation is not as good as before, his methods are still not something we can imagine. Qin Feiyang said. So, Wolf King asked, I know what you're worried about. If we go to the imperial capital, it's equivalent to walking into a trap. But if they really went to the imperial capital, then the imperial capital must be in chaos now. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. Wolf King pondered for a moment and nodded. That makes sense. Then let's go to the imperial capital to take a look. Before we go, we still have to make some preparations. Qin Feiyang glanced at the golden armored man in front of him, and his eyes suddenly lit up, bringing Yan Wei out of the ancient castle. What's the matter? Yan Wei looked at him suspiciously. Qin Feiyang said, Disguise yourself as him. Yan Wei glanced at him and instantly understood Qin Feiyang's goal. This is very simple, but there is a problem. What is it? Qin Feiyang asked. Before we came here, he was already dead. We don't even know his cultivation level, but the people in the Emperor Palace would definitely know. What if my cultivation doesn't match his? Wouldn't I be exposed? Yan Wei said. Qin Feiyang nodded and muttered, The Black Iron Army is not as good as the Kirin Army, so whether it's the commander or the deputy commander, their cultivation is not very high. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something, looked at Qin Feiyang, Yan Wei, and Wolf King and said, You guys wait for me here, I'm going to find someone. Who? One man and one wolf were suspicious. Wang Hong. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he opened the portal and walked in. Whether it was the prefecture city or the mansion master's mansion, Qin Feiyang was very familiar with them. He also guessed where Wang Hong might live. Night. The waning moon hung in the sky, and the cold stars flickered. A loft was located beside a pond, and there was no one around. Only a weak candlelight came from a window, making it look very cold and lonely. Through the window, one could vaguely see a figure sitting inside. This was the old man's former residence. And now the old man had resigned and gone to the imperial capital, so it naturally belonged to Wang Hong. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang landed in front of the loft, looked around, and raised his head to look at the figure in the window. A long-lost smile appeared on his face. He took a step forward and walked to the window. When he opened the window, a familiar figure immediately entered his sight. Who else could it be but Wang Hong? He saw Wang Hong sitting in front of the coffee table, rubbing his forehead with a worried and distressed expression. Hearing the sound of the window opening, Wang Hong also looked up suspiciously. When he saw that it was actually Qin Feiyang, his expression changed drastically. Qin Feiyang flashed and entered the room. Wang Hong immediately got up and stood in front of the window, looking outside vigilantly. Then he closed the window and turned to look at Qin Feiyang, asking, Did anyone notice that you're here? Qin Feiyang shook his head. That's good. Wang Hong heaved a sigh of relief, pointed to the coffee table next to him, and said with a smile, Sit down. Qin Feiyang nodded, walked to the coffee table and sat opposite Wang Hong. Wang Hong asked with concern, Where have you been all this time? Qin Feiyang said, Iron Bull Town. Wang Hong suddenly understood and said with a smile, Compared to the imperial capital, Iron Bull Town gave you a sense of belonging, right? Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. Wang Hong asked, Then why did you come to me now? Qin Feiyang said, I came to ask you if you know the cultivation of the muscular man in golden armor. The muscular man in golden armor? Wang Hong was stunned. Qin Feiyang said, The new commander of the invincible Black Army. Oh, him. Wang Hong nodded and said in a deep voice, He's very powerful. I heard from a few soldiers of the invincible Black Army that he's a 2-star combat emperor. A 2-star combat emperor? Qin Feiyang was stunned. Isn't he the same as Yan Wei? This is a heaven-sent opportunity. Why are you asking about this? Are you going to attack him? Wang Hong was surprised. Qin Feiyang said with a smile, I don't need to do anything. He's already dead. What? Wang Hong suddenly stood up and said in shock, Who did it? A very terrifying person. Qin Feiyang didn't say it clearly, because the news of Mu Tianyang's return was too shocking. Once it was spread out, it would definitely cause a commotion. Wang Hong's pupils contracted. Although Qin Feiyang didn't say it clearly, he knew Qin Feiyang very well. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to enter Qin Feiyang's eyes. Therefore, if Qin Feiyang said the word terrifying, then the person must be extraordinarily terrifying. Of course, he could also see that Qin Feiyang was deliberately hiding it from him. Therefore, he didn't ask too much and didn't ask about Qin Feiyang's future plans. He only reminded Qin Feiyang to be careful. As for Wang Hong's concern for him, Qin Feiyang also remembered it in his heart. After he stood up and bowed, he prepared to leave. Crack! Right at this moment, accompanied by a loud noise, the window was instantly destroyed. 2 black figures appeared in front of the window. Qin Feiyang and Wang Hong were shocked. They immediately looked at the 2 figures, and their expressions changed. The 2 figures were wearing the armor of the invincible Black Army. They had thick eyebrows and big eyes. Their bodies were burly, and their eyes were extremely sharp. Their bodies emitted an extremely terrifying aura. What's going on? Qin Feiyang thought to himself. I don't know either. Wang Hong shook his head. His eyes were filled with confusion. The 2 burly men glanced at Wang Hong and then looked at Qin Feiyang. Boom! Without saying a word, their aura exploded and they slammed their palms in the air. 2 waves of battle, qi rolled out and turned into a huge wave that rushed toward Qin Feiyang. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the attic was torn apart and dust filled the air. 5-star battle saints. Qin Feiyang's eyes were also filled with murderous intent. He pushed Wang Hong away with his palm and met the attack head-on. The 2 of them must have heard the conversation between him and Wang Hong. He had to kill them to silence them. Boom! As they neared, Qin Feiyang's body trembled and his aura suddenly soared. That's right, he had activated the Soaring Dragon incantation. In Iron Ox Town, his cultivation had already broken through to a 6-star battle saint. With the help of the Soaring Dragon incantation, he was now a 6-star battle saint. In front of a 6-star battle saint, 2 5-star battle saints would be able to crush him. His eyes were like torches. He punched out, and a terrifying force roared in all directions. He wanted to kill them with a single blow and not give them any chance to escape. At this moment, the void shook and the earth trembled. The surging battle qi vanished in an instant. Puff! The 2 burly men spat out a mouthful of blood at the same time. Their faces were filled with horror. None of them expected that in such a short period of time, Qin Feiyang's strength had already reached such a level. Roar! Clang! The 2 of them activated their fighting souls without hesitation. One of their fighting souls was a huge black panther. Its body was covered in black flames, and it exuded an extremely terrifying aura. The other person's fighting soul was a huge axe. It was dozens of feet long and looked as if it was cast from lava. Its entire body was covered in flames, and its sharpness was shocking. Feiyang, we can't continue fighting here. The city will be destroyed. Wang Hong's face turned pale. This was the first time he had witnessed a battle between battle saints. What was even more unexpected was that the young and inexperienced fellow from back then had already become so strong. Chapter 1159. Hearing Wang Hong's roar, Qin Feiyang glanced at the trembling ground and raised his eyebrows. Bang! Following this, he waved his hand and his sacred aura swept across the sky, forcefully sweeping up the 2 burly men and the 2 battle souls and soaring into the sky. Die! The 2 burly men exchanged glances and suddenly let out a roar. The 2 battle souls carried a terrifying, ferocious aura as they lunged at Qin Feiyang. You think you can kill me with your minions? Qin Feiyang let out a disdainful laugh and pointed his finger in the air. An invisible force instantly surged out. ultimate destruction. Roar! Clang! The two war souls did not have any power to resist and were instantly annihilated. Too powerful. Every time he comes back from the outside, his strength will increase by a few times. Everyone was right. If this kid doesn't die, he will become a huge threat. The two burly men's eyes trembled and their faces were filled with fear. Huge threat? Qin Feiyang chuckled and said in a domineering manner, "You're wrong. I'm not a huge threat to you. I'm a nightmare to all of you, including the Emperor and the Nation Master." Bang! After saying this, he pointed his index finger in the air and an invisible force surged like a giant python with its mouth wide open, swallowing the two men. Ah! Following two shrill cries of agony, the two burly men died on the spot, their blood splattering across the sky. What's going on? Such a terrifying shockwave. Who's causing trouble in the mansion of the Patriarch? Although the battle was brief, the people of the various districts were startled. Everyone stood in the sky above the city and glanced at the mansion of the Patriarch with the help of the hazy moonlight. Even the people of the various districts were startled, and the guards of the mansion were no exception. They all rushed toward the scene with a murderous aura. Phew! Meanwhile, seeing the two burly men being killed, Wang Hong let out a sigh of relief and yelled, "The shockwave from the battle was caused by me sparring with an old friend, so please don't panic, return to your posts and do what you're supposed to do." His voice echoed in the sky above the city like a bell. "So it's the Manor Lord sparring with someone. You really gave me a fright." It's fine. Let's disperse." Everyone suddenly understood. In the meantime, Qin Feiyang also withdrew his aura and landed in front of Wang Hong. He cupped his hands and said, "It's not good to stay here for long. I'll take my leave first." "Yes." Wang Hong nodded. Qin Feiyang opened a portal. However, at this moment, a terrifying pressure pounced over. Not only did it shatter the teleportation door, but it also firmly imprisoned Qin Feiyang and Wang Hong in the void. "There's someone else." Qin Feiyang and Shi Guang turned pale with fright. Sparring again. When the guards who had already retreated felt this majestic aura, their expressions were filled with helplessness. "If you want to spar, you should do it outside the city. You're sparring in the mansion, and in the middle of the night. Isn't this torture?" They thought that Wang Hong was sparring with his so-called old friend again, so they didn't take it to heart. At this very moment, whether it was Qin Feiyang or Wang Hong, they were all in a state of nervousness. Although this pressure was real, they couldn't find the owner of the pressure. "You're really back." Suddenly, a cold voice sounded in a dark place. "Da-da," following closely, accompanied by a series of steady footsteps. A middle-aged man in black armor slowly walked out of the darkness. Looking at the middle-aged man, Qin Feiyang felt an inexplicable fear in his heart. The middle-aged man's face was very unfamiliar, but his eyes were extremely familiar. The middle-aged man stopped in front of Qin Feiyang, his eyes full of hatred and resentment, and asked, "Do you know who I am?" Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. The middle-aged man smiled sinisterly, took out a facial restoration pill, and threw it into his mouth. At the same time, a divine aura emerged from his body. With a loud clang, the middle-aged man's armor shattered, revealing a white robe. Divine aura! It's actually divine aura! Qin Feiyang's body and mind trembled. He had already guessed the true identity of the person in front of him. At the same time, under the effect of the facial restoration pill, the middle-aged man's figure and appearance were constantly changing. Soon, an old man, a familiar face, appeared in Qin Feiyang's line of sight. Imperial Tutor. Qin Feiyang's face was pale. He never thought that the Imperial Tutor would be lying in ambush here. Wang Hong secretly said, "Feiyang, believe me, I didn't betray you." "Don't worry, I never doubted you." Qin Feiyang comforted him. The Imperial Tutor glanced at Wang Hong, looked at Qin Feiyang and laughed. "Are you very surprised?" Qin Feiyong was silent. Now he couldn't speak either. Because of the imperial tutor's pressure, he was firmly imprisoned. Even breathing was difficult, let alone speaking. A few days ago, when I learned that the invincible Black Army guarding the Butterfly Valley were all killed, the first person I thought of was you. But I wasn't sure, so I disguised myself as an ordinary invincible Black Army soldier and followed the commander of the invincible Black Army to the spiritual state to spy on Wang Hong. Although Wang Hong said that he had cut ties with you, I know that he is still loyal to you. If you really came back, you would definitely come to him sooner or later. Just as I expected, you came. The imperial tutor laughed. Qin Feiyong's face was gloomy. This old man was indeed a cunning old fox. The imperial tutor continued, I just heard you say that the new commander of the invincible Black Army was killed. I'm curious, other than you, who else would have the guts to do so? Qin Feiyong looked at him gloomily. Oh, right, I forgot you can't speak now. The imperial tutor laughed and slightly restrained his aura. Qin Feiyong's body became light, and he immediately gasped for breath. However, the imperial tutor was still worried. Qin Feiyong had too many tricks up his sleeves. If he was careless, he could escape. Therefore, he took Wang Hong hostage. He waved his hand, and Wang Hong flew to him uncontrollably. The imperial tutor looked at Qin Feiyong and laughed. If you dare to play tricks, don't blame me for being merciless. Qin Feiyong took a deep breath and stared at the imperial tutor with a vicious expression. The imperial tutor didn't care at all and said lightly, Now tell me, what kind of terrifying person dared to kill my men? Your men? Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. That's right. That new commander of the invincible Black Army is a confidant that I trained. The imperial tutor said. Qin Feiyong said in a deep voice, I didn't expect you to form a clique for your personal gain. What are you up to? I'm the one asking you questions. The imperial tutor grabbed Wang Hong's neck and said coldly. Qin Feiyong's face changed, and he quickly shouted, Stop! Then tell me quickly, the imperial tutor shouted. Qin Feiyong looked at Wang Hong and said, You're the one who wants to know. Don't blame me if you regret it later. This person is Mu Tianyang. What? The imperial tutor's body trembled, and his old eyes were filled with shock. Mu Tianyang? Wang Hong's face was filled with suspicion, but he seemed to have thought of something, and his face suddenly changed. Are you regretting knowing the truth now? Qin Feiyong looked at the imperial tutor and sneered. Nonsense. Mu Tianyang was killed by the Qin Emperor 10,000 years ago. How could it be him? Chapter 1160. I knew you would say that. In fact, I don't want to believe it either, but it's the truth. Qin Feiyong said, Where's the evidence? The imperial preceptor said in a deep voice. Qin Feiyong said there's no evidence. You can go to the ruins. Maybe you can find the result you want there. The imperial preceptor frowned, but suddenly a trace of ridicule crawled up his old face, and he said, Do you think this old man will be fooled? Let me tell you, no matter what you say today, this old man will not believe it. Hand over Changshui and the castle immediately. Qin Feiyong was not surprised. He had already expected such a result. But he could never hand over Changshui and the castle. Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed slightly, and he looked at the imperial preceptor and said, I want to see the emperor. His Majesty is not someone you can see just because you want to. The imperial preceptor sneered. Qin Feiyong said angrily, Although you are the imperial preceptor, you are also a subject. Do you want to deceive the emperor? The imperial preceptor laughed and said, Don't talk nonsense. This is a capital offense. And to be honest, it's not that this old man doesn't want to take you there, but that His Majesty doesn't want to see you. No, His Majesty wants to see him very much. Suddenly, a hoarse voice sounded. Before the voice died away, a white-haired old man descended on the attic. It was Elder Qin who took back the pagoda. There was also a man and a wolf standing beside Elder Qin. It was Wolf King and Yanwei. What's going on? Seeing this, Qin Feiyang was very surprised. Why would Wolf King and Yanwei be with Elder Qin? At the same time, seeing Elder Qin suddenly appear, the Imperial Preceptor's eyebrows flashed with a trace of hostility. Elder Qin glanced at Qin Feiyang and Wang Hong, then looked at the Imperial Preceptor and said lightly, "Imperial Preceptor, please let them go." "You're lucky." The Imperial Preceptor glanced at Qin Feiyang, and a trace of killing intent flashed in his old eyes. Qin Feiyang stretched his muscles and pointed at Wang Hong. "And him." The State Preceptor snorted coldly. He deceived the Emperor and abused his power for personal gain. His crimes are unforgivable. I will execute him on the spot as a warning to others. "No," Qin Feiyang bellowed. However, it was too late. The Grand Tutor squeezed his hand, and Wang Hong's throat and neck were broken on the spot. "Bastard!" Qin Feiyang glared and rushed over like a madman. "Humph!" State Preceptor snorted and threw Wang Hong to Qin Feiyang as if he was throwing garbage. But at the same time, a strand of false god's power surged out from his palm and entered Wang Hong's psyche ocean, crushing Wang Hong's soul in an instant. Qin Feiyang rushed up and hugged Wang Hong. He squatted in the air and looked at Wang Hong's pale face. He anxiously shouted, "Senior, wake up!" However, Wang Hong was already dead. "It's all my fault. I shouldn't have come to find you. I'm the one who killed you. I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Qin Feiyang tightly hugged the corpse that was gradually turning cold as he blamed himself in his heart. Above, Wolf King's eyes were also filled with killing intent and anger. Boom! All of a sudden, a monstrous killing intent rushed out from Qin Feiyang's body. A bloody kill. Word appeared between his eyebrows. He landed on the ground and placed Wang Hong on the ground. He looked up at Old Man Qin and questioned. "The Emperor ordered that no one is allowed to harm anyone related to me for 10 years. Now that State Preceptor is doing this, isn't it the same as disobeying the Emperor's order?" Old Man Qin raised his eyebrows and looked at the State Preceptor. He then looked down at Qin Feiyang and said, "His Majesty did say so. However, Wang Hong is a subject of the Empire. He knew that you had returned, but did not report it. This is a crime of deceiving the Emperor. It is understandable that State Preceptor will execute him on the spot." Qin Feiyang clenched his hands tightly. His nails had already sunk into his flesh and dragon blood dripped down. The State Preceptor sneered. Wolf King said, "Little Qinzi, don't be impulsive." Yanwei also secretly advised, "Yes, revenge is a dish best served cold. Don't do anything stupid." Qin Feiyang was silent. His whole body was surrounded by blood. This was killing intent. But in the end, he loosened his hands, and the kill, word between his eyebrows, gradually disappeared. He looked down at Wang Hong and whispered, "Senior, I won't let you die in vain." Hearing this, the State Preceptor sneered. "Let's go," Old Man Qin urged. Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Accompanied by a loud noise, a deep pit appeared on the ground. Then he held Wang Hong and gently put him into the pit. Plop! Immediately, he knelt in front of Wang Hong and kowtowed 3 times. He said word by word, "If I don't avenge you, I, Qin Feiyang, am not a human." Hearing this oath, the smile on the State Preceptor's face disappeared. In terms of strength, he was much stronger than Qin Feiyang. But looking at Qin Feiyang's eyes at this moment, he couldn't help but feel inexplicably flustered and afraid. Swish! Qin Feiyang stood up and buried Wang Hong. Then he flew to Old Man Qin and said, "Let's go." Old Man Qin nodded. He waved his hand and opened a portal. Then he turned around and led 2 people and 1 wolf into the portal. The State Preceptor raised his eyebrows and followed in. Butterfly Valley. Beside the teleportation altar, a group of people appeared one after another. Old Man Qin raised his arm. Battle Qi gushed out of his fingertips and flowed into the teleportation altar. Qin Feiyang looked at the teleportation altar and secretly asked Wolf King and Yanwei, "Why is Old Man Qin here?" "We don't know either. He suddenly appeared in Butterfly Valley just now. We couldn't escape even if we wanted to, but it's a blessing in disguise. He saved your life." Wolf King and Yan Wei secretly transmitted their voices. They were both terrified. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. It seemed that Old Man Qin had already begun to investigate the state preceptor. This was indeed a good thing for him. Buzz! The teleportation altar finally opened. Old Man Qin said, "Let's go." Qin Feiyang waved his hand and sent Yan Wei and Wolf King to the ancient castle. Then he stepped onto the teleportation altar alone. To this, Old Man Qin only frowned and didn't say anything. Pagoda! Qin Feiyang, Old Man Qin, and the state preceptor appeared one after another. Next, Qin Feiyang followed behind the two of them. Walking out of the pagoda, he scanned the familiar mountain range in front of him. Although stepping into the imperial capital was equivalent to entering a cage, at this moment he was fearless. Old Man Qin turned to look at the state preceptor and smiled. State preceptor must be tired from running around in the spiritual state. It must be very tiring. Please go back and rest. Obviously, he was sending the state preceptor away. The state preceptor said indifferently, "Qin Feiyang is a felon. I must personally escort him to His Majesty." State preceptor is really considerate. Old Man Qin chuckled and opened the teleportation gate. He retreated to the side and stretched out his hand. "State preceptor, please." The state preceptor glanced at him coldly and stepped into the teleportation gate. Qin Feiyang was about to follow in, but suddenly, Old Man Qin grabbed him and shook his head. "This teleportation gate isn't the one that leads to Bright Sky Palace." Qin Feiyang was suspicious. "It's better to be wary of some people," Old Man Qin said meaningfully. He opened another teleportation gate and led Qin Feiyang in. Outside the imperial city, in the sky above a certain mountain, an old man in white appeared out of thin air. It was the state preceptor. Looking at the mountains and rivers below, the state preceptor was stunned. Wasn't he going to see His Majesty? Why was he here? Damn it! The next moment, he realized that he had been tricked and hurriedly turned around. As expected, there was no trace of Qin Feiyang and Old Man Qin. "Old Dog Qin, how dare you trick me? I'm not done with you today." He was furious. He opened the teleportation gate again and rushed in like lightning. At the same time, Bright Sky Palace, this palace that was once destroyed by Qin Feiyang, was not abandoned because of this. Instead, it was more glorious and imposing than before. In a pavilion, a child who looked like a porcelain doll was holding an ancient scroll and reciting a poem that he wasn't familiar with. Beside him, a middle-aged couple sat side by side, looking at the child with a gratified smile on their faces. Swish! Suddenly, the void shook and two figures appeared in the pavilion. It was Qin Feiyang and Old Man Qin. "Greetings, Your Majesty, Empress, and little prince." Old Man Qin bowed. That's right. The three people in the pavilion were the current emperor, empress, and little prince Qin Haoyan. The arrival of Qin Feiyang and Old Man Qin also interrupted the little prince's recitation. He raised his head, revealing a childish face, looking at Qin Feiyang and Old Man Qin. "Brother!" At a glance, he recognized Qin Feiyang. He immediately put down the ancient scroll in his hand and ran towards Qin Feiyang. Seeing this, the Empress's expression changed. She hurriedly got up, hugged the little prince, and hid behind the Emperor as if she had seen a devil. At the same time, the Emperor also raised his head to look at Qin Feiyang, frowning slightly. Qin Feiyang said coldly, "Old Man Qin, it seems that he doesn't want to see me." Old Man Qin smiled bitterly. "His Majesty, actually didn't know that you were coming. The reason why I said this is because I want to save you from the Imperial Preceptor." "Save?" Qin Feiyang sneered. The Emperor waved to the Empress and little prince. "You guys go back first." The Empress had been waiting for this sentence. As soon as she heard the Emperor's words, she immediately carried the little prince and ran to the palace not far away. It was as if, in her eyes, Qin Feiyang was a demon that ate people without spitting out their bones. However, the little prince was a little unwilling. He kept shouting that he wanted to play with his brother, but the Empress would definitely not listen to him. The scene when the little prince fell into Qin Feiyang's hands last time was still vivid in her mind. After entering the palace, she not only closed the door tightly, but also asked the guards outside to guard strictly, not allowing Qin Feiyang to take half a step in. The Emperor looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Even the mother of a country is so afraid of you. Do you feel a sense of accomplishment?" "I just feel sad," Qin Feiyang said lightly. "You?" the Emperor asked. "What's sad about me?" "The sad person I'm talking about is you. As the Emperor of a country, you have a lot of wives and concubines, but in the end, only one son is going to send you off. Isn't that sad?" Qin Feiyang sneered. The Emperor frowned and snorted coldly. "Even if I only have one son, I don't need you to pity him." "Pity you?" "Ha ha!" Qin Feiyang couldn't help laughing and said, "You don't say one day in the future it may really be me who will send you off." His words were filled with a piercing coldness. What kind of person was the Emperor? How could he not understand such words? Obviously. Chapter 1161. The Emperor's face was as dark as water. "Can't we sit down peacefully and have a good talk?" he asked. "That will never happen." Qin Feiyang shook his head. Old man Qin couldn't help but sigh as he watched the father and son arguing with each other. The Emperor also lost his patience and said, "Then tell me, what is your purpose in coming to me? If it's for your mother, then don't say it. There's no room for negotiation." Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed fiercely. "I'm here to tell you that Mu Tianyang is back." "What?" The Emperor's face changed. Old man Qin was also surprised. He stared at Qin Feiyang and asked, "Is this true?" Qin Feiyang said, "It's up to you to believe it or not." The Emperor looked at Qin Feiyang and suddenly said, "Shouldn't you hate me for what I did to you? Why are you here to tell me this news?" Qin Feiyang said, "I'm doing this for the people of the world, not for you." "The people of the world," the Emperor muttered to himself as if he was thinking of something in the past. There was a complicated expression in his eyes. After a while, the Emperor looked at Qin Feiyang and shook his head. "You're really like the ancestor. Unfortunately, you're not the ancestor." The ancestor he was talking about was the first emperor of the Great Qin Empire, the Qin Emperor. The ancestor created a huge empire and left countless legends and miracles. Of course, I can't compare to the ancestor. But in this world, everyone has the right to talk about me except you. Do you understand? Qin Feiyang shouted in a stern voice. Old man Qin frowned. "No matter what, he's your father. You shouldn't talk about him like that." "Father?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. "Is there a father who abandons his wife and son? No. Besides, I've already returned the bloodline power he gave me. What else can't I say?" The Emperor couldn't help but clench his fists. Obviously, he was furious. Life is like this. Once you take that step, you will never be able to turn back. Back then, when you crippled my cultivation and drove me out of the imperial capital, you should have known that such a day would come. Qin Feiyang said coldly. The Emperor couldn't hold it in any longer and roared. "Lock him up in the prison immediately. Without my order, no one is allowed to visit him." "Your Majesty!" But at this moment, the imperial preceptor came in anger. He gloomily glanced at old man Qin, then looked at the Emperor and bowed. "Your Majesty, this child has become a great threat. We can't let him live any longer. I suggest that we execute him on the spot." The emperor clenched his fists and nodded. "All right, execute him on the spot." Qin Feiyang shrugged. It was not the first or second time that the emperor had ordered him to be killed. He no longer cared. But since he didn't die the last time, he swore that no matter what difficulties he encountered in the future, he would try his best to survive. Therefore, he would not sit still and wait for death. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang's mind moved. He activated the concealment technique and turned around to use phantom steps. Without looking back, he escaped into the air. "You think you'll be fine if you hide in the castle." The imperial preceptor sneered. His divine sense emerged and rushed towards the place where Qin Feiyang disappeared. Why isn't there? The imperial preceptor was dumbfounded. He thought that Qin Feiyang had hidden in the castle, but when he used his divine sense to scan, he didn't find the castle at all. No. Old Man Qin and the emperor looked at each other. Old Man Qin also immediately released his divine sense to search for the place where Qin Feiyang disappeared. A moment later, his gaze trembled slightly. He raised his head to look at the emperor and shook his head. "There really isn't." The emperor said, "Impossible. Everyone knows that the castle can't be moved. He must be here." Old Man Qin was surprised. Could it be that his castle can be moved? "Do you think that other than the castle, I don't have any other means to save my life? Today is different from the past. In these years in the Forgotten Continent, I've obtained far more than you can imagine. Just wait, the good show is yet to come." Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's cold voice came from afar. "What? He's already escaped so far." The three of them hurriedly raised their heads and looked in the direction of the voice. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. "Not good. The direction of the voice is the throne room." The emperor's expression changed. Boom! Before he finished speaking, a deafening loud noise sounded in the throne room. "This is only the interest. In the future, I'll make you pay back double." Qin Feiyang's voice sounded again. The emperor hurriedly rose into the air and swept over the throne room like lightning. Immediately, he was so angry that his whole body trembled. Below them, the originally dazzling throne room had already turned into a pile of ruins. The throne room was the place where every generation of emperor ascended the throne. It was the place where civil and military officials met the emperor. It was the most sacred place in the imperial palace. It could be said that the throne room represented the imperial power and the emperor's prestige. However, at this moment, Qin Feiyang actually destroyed the throne room in such a grand manner. This could no longer be described as offensive. This was blasphemy. This was rebellion. This was a challenge to the emperor's authority. "Your Majesty, did you see that? This is Qin Feiyang's character. He doesn't care about his relatives and is ruthless. If we don't get rid of him as soon as possible, next time he will not only destroy the throne room, but the entire imperial palace, including you and me." The Grand Master rushed over and immediately roared when he saw the scene. Old Qin glanced at the Grand Master and lowered his head to scan the ruins below. His old face was full of displeasure. Boom! The next moment, two divine wills emerged, covering the sky and covering the earth in all directions. "Your Majesty, what's going on? Who is so bold to destroy the throne room?" Whoosh! Figures broke through the air and flew over. There were the commanders of the Kirin army. There were the deputy commanders of the Kirin army. There were the deputy commanders of the invincible Black army. There were also the chief eunuch and the princesses and concubines, looking at the throne room that had been razed to the ground. All of their faces were filled with bewilderment. Qin Feiyang, the Grand Master, said each word with a murderous aura. "It's him." Heard it. Everyone's face changed color. Even some timid people were so scared that their faces turned pale. Old Qin retracted his divine thoughts and looked at the emperor. Your Majesty, we can't find him. It seems that he has escaped. As long as he enters the imperial capital, he has nowhere to run. All deputy commanders, listen to my order, the Emperor shouted. Yes, Your Majesty. Whether it was the deputy commanders of the Kirin army or the invincible Black Army, they all knelt in the void. The Emperor said, Track him down immediately. Even if you have to turn the imperial capital upside down, find him for me. It could be seen that this time he was really angry. Yes, Your Majesty. The group of deputy commanders responded respectfully, then turned around and flew into the sky. Commander of the Kirin army, the Emperor shouted again. Yes, Your Majesty. The commander of the Kirin army bowed and said, His mother is in the Violet Palace. He will definitely find a way to see her. Immediately go to the Violet Palace and guard it. As long as you see him, kill him without mercy. In addition, issue a bounty. Anyone who provides the whereabouts of Qin Feiyang will be rewarded with a sacred artifact and 3 chances to enter the Imperial Palace's martial arts treasury. And the one who takes the head of Qin Feiyang will be conferred the title of Marquis. The Emperor shouted angrily. His voice was like thunder, piercing through the clouds. Conferred the title of Marquis. The commander of the Kirin army trembled both physically and mentally. Since the establishment of the Great Qin Empire, other than the 100 Marquis that were personally conferred by the first emperor, there had never been a new Marquis. Of course, the successive emperors also had the idea of conferring the title of Marquis, but the successive emperors also had concerns, and this concern was the current 100 Marquis. If others were to be conferred the title of Marquis, then the current 100 Marquis would definitely have objections. After all, the ancestors of these Marquis were the founding fathers who followed the first emperor to conquer the world. In other words, they were all descendants of meritorious officials. If others were to be on equal footing with them, they would not be happy. So after 10,000 years, there had never been a new Marquis. But who would have thought that at this moment, in order to hunt down Qin Feiyang, the emperor would actually issue such a decree? This was enough to show that the emperor was not joking this time. He was going to be serious. Seeing the commander of the Kirin army not moving, the emperor angrily shouted, What are you standing there for? Hurry up and go. The commander of the Kirin army knelt in the air and shouted, Your Majesty, the title of Marquis is not a small matter. Your Majesty, please reconsider. The emperor said, I have made up my mind. Your Majesty, the commander of the Kirin army, still wanted to say something. The emperor was furious and shouted, Do you want to defy the decree? This subordinate does not dare. This subordinate will go now. The commander of the Kirin army's eyes trembled. He quickly got up and opened the portal to leave. When the portal disappeared, the emperor looked at the horizon and said, If I don't kill you, where will my dignity go? After that, he flicked his sleeves and left. Little bastard, let's see how you escape this time. The imperial tutor laughed in his heart. This was exactly the result he wanted. Beside him, Elder Qin stared at the emperor's back and remained silent. However, if one looked closely, they would find that his eyes were fixed on the imperial tutor. There was a strange light in the depths of his eyes. What? Qin Feiyang is back again? And he destroyed the throne room. He's too audacious. Soon, the news of Qin Feiyang's return was like a plague, spreading to every corner of the imperial city. Everyone was shocked. Why is this child so stupid? Purple Flower Palace. Qin Feiyang's mother also received the news immediately. She was so anxious that she could not sit still. Mother, don't worry. Heaven helps the worthy. That's right. His Highness is no longer the child he used to be. Since he dares to come back, he must be confident. The 2 maids consoled her from the side. However, even though they said that they themselves were filled with worry, destroying the throne room was tantamount to directly challenging the emperor's authority. This was a serious crime that could lead to the extermination of 9 generations. Why did His Highness do such a stupid thing? Ren Wushuang, the old master, Dong Zhengyang, Shenmei, and others were also worried about Qin Feiyang, facing the full pursuit of the Kirin army and the invincible Black Army, facing the fatal temptation of being conferred the title of Marquis. Would Qin Feiyang really have a way out? Ha! However, in a certain alchemy room in the Divine Palace, a man in white was laughing. Yes, this is the Qin Feiyang I know. Continue. I look forward to your performance. I also believe that you will definitely give me a bigger surprise. Ha! This man was Lu Xingqian. Chapter 1162. The moment Qin Feiyang returned, the imperial capital was in turmoil. Not only were the people from the imperial palace looking for him, his former friends were also looking for him. But no one knew where he went, and no one saw him. It was as if he had disappeared from the face of the earth. Imperial City, the 10th district. This district was rather backward, and the environment was also very poor. The cultivation of the people here did not surpass the War Master, but it was very simple. In a secluded alley, there was a shabby tavern located here. The tavern was very simple and crude, with only 3 or 4 tables. The business was also very calm, with only 2 tables of guests drinking and chatting. There were 6 hunters at one table, all of whom looked middle-aged and had many scars on their bodies. They ate meat and drank wine in large mouthfuls, looking very forthright. What was different from them was that there were only 2 guests at the table beside them. These 2 people were also middle-aged men, but they were very quiet and only drank silently. The wine was very bitter, but if one tasted it carefully, they would be able to taste something different from the bitterness. This taste was tranquility. Although the 6 hunters beside him were very noisy, Qin Feiyang's heart was especially peaceful. That's right. These 2 silent big men were Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei. Big news! Big news! After a while, another man dressed in hunter attire ran into the tavern in a hurry. He also looked middle-aged, but he was relatively thin, and there was a sense of competence between his eyebrows. What big news? The 6 hunters who were drinking put down their wine jars and turned their heads to look at him curiously. Obviously, they were all acquaintances. The skinny man said, I just received news that Qin Feiyang has returned, and even destroyed the throne room in front of His Majesty and the Imperial Advisor. What? Is this kid crazy? What kind of place is the throne room? He dares to destroy it? Isn't he courting death? Is His Majesty very angry now? The 6 hunters were shocked. Yes, he's furious. He even issued a bounty. Anyone who sees Qin Feiyang will be rewarded with a sacred artifact and free entry into the Imperial Palace's martial arts treasury 3 times. If you can take Qin Feiyang's head, you will be conferred the title of Marquis. The skinny man said, his eyes filled with desire. Conferred Marquis. The 6 hunters were dumbfounded. The tavern owner and waiter were also dumbfounded. Crack! But at the same time, the sound of a wine glass breaking could be heard. The skinny man and the others all looked at Qin Feiyang, only to see that the wine cup in Qin Feiyang's hand had already shattered into pieces. Yan Wei hurriedly got up and smiled apologetically. I'm sorry. My brother has suffered some setbacks recently and is in a bad mood. We will compensate according to the price later. When the tavern owner heard this, he waved his hand and said with a smile, It's fine, it's fine. It's just a wine cup. Give him another one. The waiter next to him nodded and took out a new wine glass. He brought it to Qin Feiyang and comforted him. Big brother, there's nothing you can't overcome in this world. Take it easy. Thank you. Qin Feiyang also realized that he had lost his composure. He looked up at the waiter and smiled. I'm fine. Although you are all unfamiliar faces, it's fate that brought you together. If you want to drink in the future, feel free to come here. Although our tavern is small and crude, as long as you name a dish, we can make it for you. The most important person is that we have a lot of human kindness here. The waiter smiled. Human kindness. Qin Feiyang whispered and looked at the waiter with a smile. If there's a chance, I'll definitely come here often. All right, you guys continue. The waiter smiled and ran away. The hunters talked about the conferred marquee again. The tavern owner and the waiter also chimed in from time to time. Yan Wei glanced at them and picked up the wine jug. While pouring wine for Qin Feiyang, he asked through voice transmission, "What does conferred marquee mean?" Qin Feiyang raised his wine cup and drained it in one gulp. He secretly explained, "The Grand Qin Empire has a total of 100 martial marquises, and every single martial marquis possesses extraordinary power and status." Yan Wei curiously asked, "Then how high is their status?" Qin Feiyang said, "According to the words of the mortal world, below one person and above all others." Yan Wei's body stiffened. In order to hunt down Qin Feiyang, the emperor actually gave out such conditions. No wonder Qin Feiyang lost his composure. Yan Wei raised his wine cup and smiled. "Come, today I'll accompany you until we're drunk." He was a rough person and didn't know how to comfort Qin Feiyang, so he could only accompany Qin Feiyang to drink to his heart's content. Qin Feiyang glanced at him and shook his head. "This blow is nothing to me, and now is not the time to get drunk. Are you really okay?" Yan Wei looked at him doubtfully. Qin Feiyang laughed. "Do I look like a weak person to you?" Yan Wei looked at him seriously for a moment and shook his head with a smile. "You don't." "Then, that's incredible. The question I'm thinking about now is, where did Mu Tianyang go?" Qin Feiyang drank his wine and frowned. Yan Wei pondered for a moment and thought, could this be a pretense? Qin Feiyang was stunned and asked telepathically, "What do you mean?" "What I mean is he might have guessed that we would follow him, so he deliberately went to Butterfly Valley and left some clues, making us mistakenly think that he went to the Forgotten Continent and the Imperial capital. And in reality, he might still be in the spiritual state." Yan Wei thought to himself. Qin Feiyang's eyes lit up. Why didn't he think of that? As the previous emperor, Mu Tianyang was wise and astute, so he definitely wouldn't let others easily grasp his whereabouts. Perhaps this really was a pretense. Buzz! At this moment, the image crystal in Qin Feiyang's arms rang. Qin Feiyang frowned. Who would send him a message at this time? Now that he was in the imperial capital, the people of the 9 continents and the Forgotten Continent couldn't send him a message. It could only be someone in the imperial capital. And although in the imperial capital, anyone who had established a contract bridge with him had close relationship with him, at this time he had to be cautious. So he was hesitating. Phew! After pondering for a while, Qin Feiyang took a deep breath, took out a dozen gold coins, put them on the table, and was about to get up and leave. But the conversation between the hunters, the tavern owner, and the waiter piqued his interest. The waiter asked, "Do you think Qin Feiyang will be caught this time?" For a moment, the tavern owner and the hunters fell silent. Qin Feiyang didn't pay any attention to the trembling image crystal. He looked at them with great interest. A moment later, the tavern owner shook his head and said, "Actually, it's obvious that the people of the Imperial Palace won't be able to catch him." Qin Feiyang was stunned, got up and walked over, smiled and said, "Why do you say so? If Qin Feiyang is really so easy to catch, he wouldn't have escaped so many times in the past. Moreover, when he destroyed the throne room, His Majesty and the Imperial Advisor were both present, but they still let him escape. Not to mention that he has now escaped from the Imperial Palace. Although I haven't seen Qin Feiyang, I have heard a lot of rumors about him. His current strength can't confront the Imperial Palace head-on. But in terms of means, I reckon that no one in the Imperial Palace can compete with him." The tavern owner chuckled. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. He didn't expect that in the eyes of these ordinary people, he would have such a high opinion of him. Bill. Qin Feiyang put the gold coins in his hand on the table. The tavern owner glanced at the gold coins, there were more than a dozen, and hurriedly said, "That's too much." Qin Feiyang and the waiter drank 2 pots of wine, and these 2 pots of wine were just ordinary spirits, worth a few silver coins at most. Qin Feiyang glanced at the hunters and said with a smile, "It's okay, just treat it as my treat." Then he opened the portal and left with Yanwei. In the tavern, several people looked at each other, then shook their heads and laughed and whispered again. Outside the city, Black Dragon Pool, the image crystal had stopped vibrating. However, he was waiting. If the person who sent him a message before really had something to ask him, then he would definitely continue to send him a message later. Sure enough, in less than 100 breaths, the image crystal vibrated again. Qin Feiyang took out the image crystal. Buzz! An illusory figure appeared. It was a woman in white, with an exquisite figure, fluttering black hair, exquisite facial features, and smooth skin. She could be called a peerless beauty. "Sister." Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled slightly. That's right. This woman was Ren Wushuang. "Feiyang." Seeing Qin Feiyang, Ren Wushuang was also very excited. Qin Feiyang said, self-reproachfully, "Sister, I'm sorry to have made you worry." Ren Wushuang said angrily, "Silly boy, what's the relationship between us? Why are you apologizing to me?" Qin Feiyang felt warm in his heart and asked, "How is the old man now?" Ren Wushuang said, "Grandpa is very good, but he often misses you and wants to see you. I'm sorry, I haven't visited you since I came back." Qin Feiyang lowered his head and said, he treated Ren Wushuang as his own sister, and he also treated the old man as his own grandfather. So when he heard this, he felt guilty. "It's okay, because we all know that you have no choice now, and you don't want to implicate us. Grandpa and I don't ask for much as long as you're fine," Ren Wushuang said with a smile. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang's mood became even more depressed. Ren Wushuang sighed and said with a smile, "Guo Feiyang, there's someone who wants to talk to you." Qin Feiyang was stunned. He looked up at Ren Wushuang and asked, "Who is it?" "Me." An old man walked to Ren Wushuang's side and entered Qin Feiyang's sight. "Old Qin." Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled and said angrily, "I'm telling you, if you dare to hurt her, I won't let you go." Old Qin said, "If I really wanted to hurt her, do you think you would have a chance to see her now?" Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, "Come to the Black Dragon Pool. I'll wait for you here." "Okay." Old Qin nodded and immediately opened the portal and walked in. Ren Wushuang asked with concern, "Feiyang, will you be okay?" Qin Feiyang smiled and comforted. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it. Take care of yourselves." "Okay, you too," Ren Wushuang said. Qin Feiyang smiled and turned off the image crystal. Just as the image crystal was turned off, a figure descended from the void in front of them. It was old Qin. Chapter 1163. But old man Qin did not release his majesty. In order to eliminate Qin Feiyang's vigilance, he did not even take a step closer. However, Qin Feiyang did not let down his guard because of this. He asked, "This time you came to me on behalf of the emperor, or yourself?" This old man Qin said. Qin Feiyang said, "I don't remember any interaction between us before." "Not before, but it doesn't mean that there won't be in the future." Old man Qin smiled faintly and asked, "The person who entered the capital with the deputy commander last time should be you, right?" Qin Feiyang nodded. Old man Qin said, "Do you remember the question this old man asked you at that time?" Qin Feiyang said, "Of course I remember. You were asking the imperial preceptor." Old man Qin nodded and said, "Yes, this old man wants to know, what do you think of the imperial preceptor?" Qin Feiyang was silent. Old man Qin said, "There is no one else here. You can speak freely." Qin Feiyang said, "Will you believe what I say?" Old man Qin said, "This old man will think carefully." Qin Feiyang said, "The imperial preceptor is a malignant tumor. His existence will only threaten the great Qin Empire." Old man Qin's eyes flashed. Qin Feiyang asked, "Do you know why he deliberately killed me?" "Why?" Old man Qin asked. "To snatch the castle and Changshui. And every time he came to kill me, he hid it from the emperor." "What does this mean?" "This means that he wants to take the castle and Changshui for himself. One more thing, the new commander of the Invincible Black Army is the confidant of the imperial preceptor." Qin Feiyang said. "What?" Old man Qin's eyes trembled. Although Qin Feiyang's words were not very obvious, he had already noticed what Qin Feiyang wanted to say. Forming a clique for personal gain and harboring evil intentions, Qin Feiyang said, "Is there anything else you want to know?" Old Qin asked, "Is the matter of Mu Tianyang true?" "Absolutely. Before I came to the imperial capital, I even fought with him." Qin Feiyang said. "Fight?" Old man Qin frowned. One had to know that Mu Tianyang was the previous emperor. With Qin Feiyang's strength, if they really fought, how could he survive? Qin Feiyang said, "There are too many things between Mu Tianyang and I, so I can't explain it all at once. I can only tell you that his cultivation is not as good as before. If you want to get rid of him, you have to do it now." "Are you sure?" Old Qin asked. It was not that he did not trust Qin Feiyang, but this matter was too outrageous. As early as more than 10,000 years ago, Mu Tianyang had died in the hands of the previous emperor. How could he suddenly jump out? Qin Feiyang said, "It's up to you to believe it or not." Looking at Qin Feiyang, old Qin did not speak for a long time. He wanted to find something in Qin Feiyang's expression, but in the end, he did not find any trace of deception. Taking a deep breath, he asked, "Then what are you going to do next?" "I'm going to track Mu Tianyang. The great Qin Empire is the blood and sweat of my ancestors. I will not let it be destroyed in someone's hands." Qin Feiyang said firmly. This someone was naturally referring to the current emperor. Old Qin took a deep look at Qin Feiyang and sighed. "If this is true, then it's really hard for you." Qin Feiyang said, "I just want to have a clear conscience." "What a good, clear conscience. How good would it be if you and your father didn't fight to this extent?" Old Qin sighed. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, "I've already said that we are no longer father and son. So in the future, please don't let me hear such words again." Old Qin shook his head and sighed. "Fine, this old man will believe you for the time being. Go ahead and do what you want. But it's best if you can get the evidence back. At that time, this old man can tell His Majesty. After all, with your current relationship, no matter what you say, His Majesty won't believe you." "Of course. If this old man finds out that you're lying to me, this old man won't let you off." Old Qin said, "Time will prove everything." Qin Feiyang said indifferently, "It's best if that's the case." Old Qin nodded and waved his hand. A wisp of blood-red aura rushed out from the top of his head and condensed into a blood-red figure. Whether it was the figure or the appearance, this figure was exactly the same as Old Qin. "This is a strand of my killing intent. It can display my peak strength and save your life at a critical moment. But remember, this strand of killing intent can only be used once." Old Qin warned. Old Qin was a false god. With his strand of killing intent, it was equivalent to having a life-saving talisman. This kind of thing, for anyone, was a once-in-a-lifetime good thing. However, Qin Feiyang was hesitant. Although he was still unable to understand the existence of a false god, he had some understanding of it from the ancient books. Usually, whether it was the killing intent or the clone, it was related to the original body. For example, now that old Qin gave him a strand of killing intent. Then after he left, old Qin could follow this strand of killing intent to chase his location. In short, no matter where he went, old Qin would be able to find him in the end. In other words, this strand of killing intent was not only a life-saving talisman, but also a time bomb that could take his life at any time. For him, this might not be a good thing. As if seeing Qin Feiyang's concern, old Qin smiled faintly. You are really cautious, but don't worry, this old man has already cut off the connection with this strand of killing intent. In other words, it is now an independent existence and has nothing to do with this old man. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang breathed a sigh of relief and calmly accepted this strand of killing intent. Whoosh! The strand of killing intent turned into a bloody light and rushed into Qin Feiyang's qi, floating in the middle of it. Old Qin said, "Let's go. This old man will send you to the pagoda." Qin Feiyang said, "No need. I can leave the imperial capital by myself." "You can leave?" This time it was old Qin who was stunned, but he didn't ask much and said, "Then take care of yourself. Today we met here and said these words can be regarded as a little secret between the two of us. Don't mention it to anyone." Qin Feiyang nodded. Old man Qin smiled and opened the portal. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed and said, "Now that you have helped me without telling the emperor and the state preceptor, you should have noticed something." "Yes, this old man smells a conspiracy." Old Qin nodded and whispered, and then entered the portal without looking back. It seems that the imperial capital is not full of idiots. After old Qin left, Qin Feiyang muttered to himself. But before his voice fell, he suddenly thought of something. His body trembled, and his eyes lit up. "Ha, saying that others are idiots, but in fact, I am the biggest idiot." All of a sudden, he looked up to the sky and laughed. His face was full of ridicule. This was self-deprecating. After a long time, he calmed down, walked to the edge of the cliff, sat cross-legged, and closed his eyes. Everything about Mu Tianyang and the Mu family appeared in his mind one by one. Time passed little by little. In the blink of an eye, a whole day passed. Whoosh! Qin Feiyang finally opened his eyes. 2 rays of light burst out. "I think this should be the answer." He muttered to himself, got up, and took out the image crystal. After a while, a white-robed man materialized out of nowhere. It was Lu Xingqian. "Brother Qin, are you looking for me to drink?" Lu Xingqian smiled and greeted. Qin Feiyang smiled. "Yes, come to the Black Dragon Pool. Let's get drunk today." He was also very friendly. Lu Xingqian was stunned and nodded. "Okay, wait for me. I'll be right there." After saying that, the shadow dissipated. Qin Feiyang put away the image crystal, stood on the edge of the cliff, with his hands behind his back, and glanced at the mountains below. A shocking cold light flashed in the depths of his eyes. Time passed by breath. About 10 breaths later, Lu Xingqian appeared out of thin air above the Black Dragon Pool. When he found Qin Feiyang, he landed beside Qin Feiyang with a smile on his face. "Sorry to keep you waiting." Lu Xingqian smiled. "It's okay." Qin Feiyang shook his head, but he still looked down at the mountains below, not looking at Lu Xingqian. Lu Xingqian was stunned, but he didn't seem to take it to heart. He glanced at Qin Feiyang's feet and said suspiciously, "Didn't you say we'll get drunk? Why don't I see any wine?" Qin Feiyang said, "It won't be too late for us to drink after we're done with other things." "What things?" Lu Xingqian was suspicious. "Back then, you died in the inner hall, but not long after, you came back from the dead. Why is that?" "This question has been bothering me for a long time. I thought I would only know the truth when you took the initiative to tell me. But when I saw Ren Duxing yesterday, I finally had an answer in my heart." Qin Feiyang said. "What answer?" Lu Xingqian asked with a smile. Whether it was their tone or their expressions, they were very calm, as if they were discussing a very ordinary matter. "Possession. The current you is no longer the real Lu Xingqian. Qin Feiyong said. Lu Xingqian's pupil shrank, and he asked curiously, "Then tell me, who am I?" "You've told me twice that you were a true war god in the past, a real god of war. This level of existence has far surpassed the false god level. Since ancient times, there have been very few of them. So, you should also be Mu Tianyang," Qin Feiyong said. Mu Tianyang? Lu Xingqian was slightly taken aback, and he asked in confusion, "How could I be him?" "Yes, I really didn't expect you to be him." Qin Feiyong nodded, and the hidden cold light in his eyes suddenly burst out. At the same time, he suddenly turned around, grabbed Lu Xingqian's neck, and shook his head. "Don't play dumb with me. If you are not Mu Tianyang, why would Mu Qing come to you? If you are not Mu Tianyang, why would you have a space divine item? Puchi." After saying that, he tore apart Lu Xingqian's clothes and saw that there was a dark gold potential mark on Lu Xingqian's chest. The potential mark of the 6th level was dark gold. This meant that Lu Xingqian, like him, had opened the door of the 6th level of potential. Qin Feiyong saw the potential mark, and his eyes became even more aggressive. He asked, "If you are not Mu Tianyang, then how did you open the door of potential?" Lu Xingqian silently looked at Qin Feiyong. Suddenly, he smiled, shook his head, and said in confusion, "I thought that I had done it flawlessly. But how did you know that I am Mu Tianyang?" One sentence. In the land of ruins, I asked Ren Duxing, no, he should be called Mu Tianyang now. I asked him, since he had already found the divine bone of his life, why did he still want to occupy Ren Duxing's body? He told me that he wanted to become stronger. I didn't know how he could become stronger by doing this, but his words made me think of you. How could a person who had been buried in the ground come back to life? The only explanation is that he had taken over. Of course, just based on this point, I can't conclude that you are Mu Tianyang. Chapter 1164. What other factors are there? Lu Xingqian asked with a smile. The biggest factor is your cultivation, Yu Zichen said. Your cultivation has improved so fast that I can't help but suspect that you have also opened the door of potential. Sure enough, you have opened the 6th level. Another factor is Mu Qing. He personally admitted that the Mu family is the descendant of Mu Tianyang, and Mu Qing repeatedly came to you and was very respectful to you. What does this mean? You should know that Mu Qing has opened the all-seeing eye and has an extraordinary position in the Mu family. It can even be said that he is the spokesperson of the Mu family. If even he respects you so much, who do you think you are if not Mu Tianyang? Qin Feiyong said. Lu Xingqian shook his head and smiled. Your analysis is so reasonable that I can't find a reason to quibble. But speculation is just speculation. I know you won't admit it, so I have prepared a big gift for you. Qin Feiyong laughed and let go of Lu Xingqian. With a wave of his hand, Mu Qing appeared out of thin air. Looking at Mu Qing, who was covered in bruises and dripping with blood, Lu Xingqian's pupils suddenly shrank. Qin Feiyong stepped on Mu Qing and looked at Lu Xingqian with a smile. I just want to ask you, do you want him to live? Mu Qing roared. Bastard. Kill me if you want. Don't humiliate me. Lu Xingqian looked at Mu Qing, who was struggling desperately in silence. The all-seeing eye has the ability to spy on all things. Such a fighting soul must be extremely rare. Even in today's world, Mu Qing may be the only one who has such a fighting soul. I think you have high expectations for him. You must be planning to focus on training him. But if he dies here today, then your expectations will be disappointed. Qin Feiyong said with a smile. Lu Xingqian raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyong, his eyes flickering. Qin Feiyong said indifferently, We've known each other for so many years. You should know my character, so don't doubt that I dare to kill him. Alas! Lu Xingqian sighed helplessly. He looked at Mu Qing and asked, "Why are you looking for him?" This he naturally referred to Qin Feiyong. Mu Qing lowered her head, her face full of annoyance. Because of the divine crystal, the Mu clan not only lost the gate of time and space, but also caused the death of the Mu clan's second grandmaster. His heart was already buried in hatred and anger. As such, when he saw Qin Feiyong appear in the glacier forest, he didn't think too much about it. He had never thought that such a thing would happen. Lu Xingqian sighed. "If you hadn't fallen into his hands, I wouldn't be in such a passive situation right now." Qin Feiyong said, "So you admit it." Lu Xingqian looked up at Qin Feiyong and nodded. "Yes, as you said, I am also Mu Tianyang." Qin Feiyong's heart trembled. He said in a deep voice, "Not only did you take away Ren Duxing's body, but now you're also occupying Lu Xingqian's body. What do you want to do?" Lu Xingqian smiled. "Didn't I tell you that I want to become stronger?" "You can become stronger by taking over body?" Qin Feiyong frowned. Lu Xingqian said lightly, "There are some things that you can't understand. You just need to know that I have no malice towards you." "No malice. You've used me again and again, and you still dare to say such words." Qin Feiyong couldn't help but sneer. Lu Xingqian shook his head. "I'm not using you, I'm training you. Do I need you to train me? Who do you think you are?" Qin Feiyong pointed his finger in the air. An invisible force rolled toward Lu Xingqian like a wave, carrying a shocking, murderous intent. However, Lu Xingqian just waved his hand lightly and easily wiped out the invisible force. Qin Feiyong's pupils contracted. What kind of method was this? Lu Xingqian said, "Although your cultivation and mine are about the same now, if we really fight, killing you is as easy as flipping my hand. Then let's see if I kill Mu Qing first, or if you kill me first." Qin Feiyong grabbed Mu Qing's neck, a cold light flashing in his eyes. Lu Xingqian raised his eyebrows. Mu Qing roared with all his might, "Ancestor, I'm not afraid of death. Don't be threatened by him because of me. You still have the strength to roar. It seems that Fatso hasn't tortured you enough in the castle." Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed with murderous intent. He punched Mu Qing's lower abdomen, which was already badly mutilated, and blood spurted out like a fountain. Mu Qing couldn't help but howl in pain. "When you were chasing me in the internal sea, you probably didn't think that today's retribution would come. You've tried to kill me time and time again, but you've never succeeded. Now that you've fallen into my hands, are you angry and unwilling?" Qin Feiyong looked at Mu Qing and said lightly, the corners of his mouth full of ridicule. After that, he sent Mu Qing to the castle. Lu Xingqian frowned and said, "What do you want to let him go?" "Let him go?" Qin Feiyong laughed and said, "I know your next step." Lu Xingqian pondered for a while and said, "If you want to know my next step, you can go to the demonic dragon mountains in He province." Demonic dragon mountains? Qin Feiyong frowned. Suddenly, he remembered. Rin Duxing's battle sword seemed to have been obtained from the demonic dragon mountains. Could it be that the demonic dragon mountains were hiding other secrets? Lu Xingqian smiled and said, "I have time now. Do you want me to go with you?" Qin Feiyong's eyes flashed. He definitely couldn't let Lu Xingqian follow him, because Lu Xingqian definitely wouldn't miss any chance to save Mu Qing. Therefore, if he let Lu Xingqian follow him, it was equivalent to putting a time bomb beside him. But to kill Lu Xingqian, he couldn't do it. What should he do? Let him go. No, letting him go was equivalent to letting a tiger return to the mountain. Suddenly, his eyes lit up and opened a portal. He looked at Lu Xingqian and said, "Follow me to a place." "Where?" Lu Xingqian asked. Qin Feiyong said, "You'll know when you get there." Lu Xingqian looked at him deeply and entered the portal. Qin Feiyong followed, closely behind. The next moment, the two of them landed on a small plaza, surrounded by undulating mountains and towering ancient trees. In the center of the square, there was an ancient stone tower, towering into the clouds and emitting a mysterious aura. It was the pagoda. At this moment, Old Man Qin was sitting cross-legged in front of the pagoda. Sensing Qin Feiyang's aura, Old Man Qin immediately opened his eyes, but when he saw Lu Xingchen, he couldn't help but be stunned. "What's going on?" Old Man Qin looked at Qin Feiyang and asked. Qin Feiyang said, "The Mu Tianyang you want, I found him." "So fast?" Old Man Qin was slightly taken aback. He immediately sized up Lu Xingchen and frowned. "Don't tell me you're talking about him?" "That's right." Qin Feiyang nodded. "How is this possible? I've seen Mu Tianyang's portrait in an ancient book, and it doesn't look like him at all." Old Man Qin said, "It's a long story, and this is not a place to stay for long. Help me keep an eye on him and don't let him escape. When there's a chance in the future, I'll explain it to you slowly." Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. After all, this was the back mountain of the imperial palace. If it was discovered by the emperor and the state preceptor, not only would he suffer, but Old Man Qin would also be implicated. "Okay." Old Man Qin nodded. Seeing that Qin Feiyang did not show any signs of lying, he began to treat this matter seriously. Qin Feiyang did not stay. He glanced at Lu Xingchen and opened the portal, ready to leave. Old Man Qin hurriedly grabbed his arm and asked, "Do you need my help?" "Not for now." Qin Feiyang shook his head and entered the portal without looking back. Lu Xingchen, on the other hand, was smiling from beginning to end. After Qin Feiyang left, Old Man Qin turned to look at Lu Xingchen and asked suspiciously, "Are you really Mu Tianyang?" Lu Xingchen shrugged and said with a smile, "If Qin Feiyang says so, then I am." Old Man Qin could not help but frown. Back to Qin Feiyang. After leaving the pagoda, he appeared in the Black Dragon swamp again. He definitely had to go to the demonic Dragon Mountain Range. But before that, he had a very important matter to deal with first. He took out the image crystal. Buzz. Soon, the shadow of the commander of the Kirin army appeared. Seeing that it was Qin Feiyang, the commander of the Kirin army was shocked and quickly looked around. Seeing that there was no one around, he was relieved. Then he looked at Qin Feiyang and asked in a low voice, "Where are you now?" "Black Dragon Swamp," Qin Feiyang said. The commander of the Kirin army frowned and said, "The situation is so critical now. Why are you still in the Black Dragon Swamp instead of leaving the capital?" "I'll leave later. First, help me find someone," Qin Feiyang said. "Who?" the commander of the Kirin army asked. "Wan Qiu," Qin Feiyang said. "Why are you looking for him?" The commander of the Kirin army raised his eyebrows. Of course, he was no stranger to Wan Qiu. He was still entangled with his daughter. Qin Feiyang said, "Don't worry about him. Go find him immediately and try to bring him to the Black Dragon Swamp before dawn." "Okay." The commander of the Kirin army nodded, and then the shadow disappeared. Qin Feiyang put away the image crystal and looked at the waning moon in the sky, his eyes shining. Lu Xingchen saved Wan Qiu from him many times. He couldn't figure it out before, but now he knew Lu Xingchen's real identity. He finally understood that this Wan Qiu must have been bought over by Lu Xingchen. In other words, Wan Qiu had also become Lu Xingchen's subordinate. Time passed quietly. Dawn was approaching. Swish! A black shadow descended over the Black Dragon Swamp. It was the commander of the Kirin army, but he was the only one who came. Qin Feiyang also sensed the aura of the commander of the Kirin army. He jumped into the air and landed in front of the commander of the Kirin army. He asked, "Why are you alone? Where's Wan Qiu?" "I didn't find him." The commander of the Kirin army shook his head. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, "How can you not find him? Did you ask your daughter?" "Yes. She doesn't know where Wan Qiu is either. I also sent a message to Wan Qiu, but I haven't received any response. The commander of the Kirin army said. Qin Feiyang frowned. It seemed that Wan Qiu was very likely to be in Lu Xingqian's space treasure. The commander of the Kirin army asked, Why are you looking for him? Qin Feiyang said he's Mu Tianyang's lackey. Mu Tianyang. The body of the Qilin army's commander trembled as he said, The matter that you told His Majesty, I also know. But how could Wan Qiu possibly be Mu Tianyang's lackey? Chapter 1165. Crane Province. The commander of the Kirin army was stunned and asked suspiciously, Why are you going to Crane Province? Time is of the essence. Don't ask so many questions. Tell me quickly, Qin Feiyang urged. Let me think. The commander of the Kirin army pondered for a while and said, I have been to Crane Province a few times before, but it was always in Crane Province City. As for the magic Dragon Mountain Range, I have heard of it, but I did not pay much attention to it. Qin Feiyang said, Then give me the coordinates of Crane Province City. The commander of the Kirin army nodded and gave Qin Feiyang the coordinates. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and Yan Wei appeared. Qin Feiyang then took out the imitation space-time gate and handed it to Yan Wei. Yan Wei immediately activated his battle chi and activated the space-time gate. The commander of the Kirin army glanced at Yan Wei and the space-time gate, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, Her Majesty is very worried about you now. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled slightly. He resisted the impulse in his heart and said, Help me tell my mother that I will try my best to survive. Clang! Before he finished his words, accompanied by a deafening sound, the space-time gate opened completely. Let's go. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and stepped into the space-time gate without hesitation. Yan Wei nodded to the commander of the Kirin army and quickly followed in. The space-time gate quickly disappeared. Mu Tianyang. The commander of the Kirin army muttered to himself and then opened the teleportation gate and returned to the Violet Palace. On the second floor of the Violet Palace, the woman in white sat in front of the table with a worried frown. The two maids were also standing at the side. Their eyebrows were filled with worry. Duh. Accompanied by a series of footsteps, the commander of the Kirin army walked up to the second floor and stopped behind the woman in white. He bowed and said, My Majesty. The woman in white turned a deaf ear. Is something the matter, Commander? The two maids turned to the commander of the Kirin army and asked. The commander of the Kirin army said, I just went to see His Highness the 14th Prince. Hearing this, the woman in white suddenly stood up and ran to the commander of the Kirin army. She asked, Where's Feiyang? The commander of the Kirin army answered honestly, I was at the Black Dragon Pool just now, and now I've gone to Crane Province. Why is your highness going to He Province? The two maids were bewildered. I don't know either, but I think it has something to do with Mu Tianyang. The commander of the Kirin army said. Mu Tianyang, the white-robed woman's body trembled. The commander of the Kirin army sighed. Although the 14th prince always says that he hates His Majesty, in fact, he still cares a lot about the relationship between father and son. Otherwise, he would not be running around to investigate Mu Tianyang. Feiyang doesn't care about this father-son relationship. The white-robed woman shook her head. Then what does His Highness care about? The commander of the Kirin army froze and asked in confusion. He cares about the late emperor and the people of the great Qin Empire. I used to worry that Feiyang would be blinded by these enemies. But now it seems that my worries were unnecessary. Feiyang not only inherited the late emperor's bloodline and legacy, but he also inherited the late emperor's great heart of protecting the people of the world. Perhaps he has a heart that empathizes with the common people. It's just that I really can't bear to let him bear this burden now. The white-robed woman sighed faintly. Protecting the people of the world as his responsibility, compassion for the people. Your Highness, are you really such a person? If so, Your Majesty, shouldn't you feel ashamed? The commander of the Kirin army murmured. Crane Province. Just like the capital of the spiritual state, the capital of Crane Province had 5 major districts: North, South, East, West, and the Central District. At this moment, the night was as dark as ink and dotted with cold stars. In the sky above the city center, a stone door silently appeared. The stone door slowly opened. 2 figures strode out. It was Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and put away the space-time gate. He then lowered his head and scanned the city below. The Holy Palace, the Prefecture Master's residence, and the State Prison were all in the Central District. And in the Central District, he sensed many powerful auras. Most of them were battle monarchs and battle emperors. The auras of battle masters were not absent, but they were pitifully few. And there was an especially strong aura that came from the Prefecture Master's residence. It was a 5-star battle emperor. If I remember correctly, Tan Wu seems to be from here. Qin Feiyang whispered. Who is Tan Wu? Yan Wei looked at him suspiciously. An old friend. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, Go down and find out the coordinates of the demonic dragon mountain range. Okay. Yan Wei nodded and turned into a stream of light, quickly disappearing into the city below. Which expert has come to my estate city? Soon, a loud and clear shout sounded. Following closely, a middle-aged man dressed in black rushed out of the Prefecture Master's residence and headed straight for Qin Feiyang. This person was the 5-star battle emperor that Qin Feiyang had sensed before. Obviously, he sensed Qin Feiyang's aura. The middle-aged man landed opposite Qin Feiyang and sized up Qin Feiyang. He muttered to himself, Why does he look so familiar? The middle-aged man cupped his hands and asked, May I ask who you are? Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang did not hide anything. What? The middle-aged man turned pale with fright. Qin Feiyang said indifferently, You should be the current Prefecture Master of his state. Don't be nervous. I am not here to cause trouble. But even so, the middle-aged man did not let down his guard and asked carefully, Then why are you here? Qin Feiyang did not answer and waited quietly. The middle-aged man did not dare to say a word and stood silently opposite him. Whoosh! A moment later, Yan Wei rushed into the sky and looked at the middle-aged man in front of him. He walked to Qin Feiyang and transmitted his voice. I've heard that the magic Dragon Mountain Range is located in the far west of the city. It is tens of thousands of miles away from here. What about the coordinates? Qin Feiyang asked. I've also heard about it. Yan Wei nodded. Then let's go, Qin Feiyang said. Yan Wei waved his hand, opened the portal, and retreated to the side. Qin Feiyang glanced at the middle-aged man and said indifferently, You can report to the imperial capital that I have come to his state. After saying that, he turned and entered the portal. Yan Wei followed him in. The middle-aged man did not dare to breathe loudly, but after the portal completely disappeared, he let out a long breath. Then, a look of surprise crawled up his face. Why did Qin Feiyang suddenly come to their estate? And why was he so fearless? At the same time, a huge mountain range was located in the far west, and one could not see the end of it at a glance. Mountain stream. Giant peaks stood like a forest, towering into the sky like a battle sword. Under the night sky, those towering mountains were like giant dragons lying under the ground, exuding a majestic aura that made one's heart palpitate. This was the magic Dragon Mountain Range. In the sky above the forest at the edge of the mountain range, Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei appeared one after another. Qin Feiyang raised his head and scanned the mountains and rivers in front of him. A hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. The magic Dragon Mountain Range was bigger than he imagined. Yan Wei said, "As far as I know, the Magic Dragon Mountain Range is the most dangerous place in He State. No one has ever dared to go deep, so no one knows how big the Magic Dragon Mountain Range is." The most dangerous place? Qin Feiyong raised his eyebrows. Yes, it is said that not only are beasts rampant here, but there is also a mysterious power. No one who enters the depths of the Magic Dragon Mountain Range can walk out alive. Yan Wei said, "What mysterious power?" Qin Feiyong was suspicious. Yan Wei said, "A power that can rob the vitality of living beings." What? Isn't this the same as the Black Dragon Glacier and the Demonic Island? Qin Feiyong said in surprise. Yes. Yan Wei nodded and said, "So I suspect that the Magic Dragon Mountain Range might be related to the Black Dragon Glacier and the Demonic Island." Qin Feiyong's eyes flickered. From the Black Dragon Glacier, he obtained the Magic Dragon's Heart and Magic Dragon's Eye. From the Demonic Island, he obtained another reverse scale. What were these things? Could he find the correct answer in the Magic Dragon Mountain Range? Let's go. Qin Feiyong waved his hand, and the two of them turned into streaks of light, flying towards the depths of the mountain range like lightning. Magic Dragon's Eye, Magic Dragon's Eye, Magic Dragon Mountain Range. They all had the word Magic Dragon in them. If this was a coincidence, then it would be too much of a coincidence. Perhaps there really was some kind of connection between the three of them. In the mountain range, it was indeed as Yan Wei had said, the beasts were rampant. However, the beasts on the periphery weren't very strong. They were basically only at the War Emperor level. However, as they slowly went deeper, the number of beasts in the War sect gradually increased. Time passed. Dawn arrived. On the horizon, the morning sun slowly rose. The sunlight illuminated the mountains and the earth, dispelling the cold air left behind by the night. Qin Feiyong and Yan Wei did not stop and rest, and had already crossed over 10,000 miles. Along the way, they would occasionally meet some people who were training in the Magic Dragon Mountain Range or searching for treasures. However, the two of them ignored them. As for the mysterious power that Yan Wei mentioned, Qin Feiyong had never sensed it. Crack! Boom! Noon. Suddenly, waves of battle, fluctuations came from the distance. The fluctuations were very strong, containing both the aura of humans and the aura of beasts. It was obvious that somewhere in front of them, someone was fighting with a beast. Qin Feiyong looked at each other and increased his speed, rushing towards the location of the battle fluctuations. The strength of the beasts in this area was basically between 3 and 5 Star War sect. To Qin Feiyong and Yan Wei, it was naturally nothing. After all, one was a 6 Star War saint and the other was a 2 Star War emperor. But to the people of He Province, the level of danger here was no less than a dragon's pool or a tiger's den. This was because the strongest representative of He Province, the prefecture lord of He Province, was only a 5 Star War sect. Of course, the previous prefecture lord of He Province was definitely stronger. However, the previous prefecture lord had to protect the teleportation altar of He Province, so it was impossible for him to be in the Magic Dragon Mountain Range right now. Therefore, Qin Feiyong judged that the ones fighting with the beasts in front were most likely Ren Duxing and his group. Boom! Crack! As they got closer, the battle fluctuations became stronger and stronger, and Qin Feiyong was even more certain of his thoughts, because the fluctuations of the battle carried a strand of saint might. One had to know that in the 9 provinces, it was impossible for there to be a war saint level powerhouse. Qin Feiyong's eyes also revealed a trace of killing intent. Soon, the two of them passed through a forest and stopped in the air above a mountain ridge, gazing ahead. More than 10 miles away, a man and a beast were crazily fighting in the sky. Blood flowed everywhere, and the mountains and rivers below were destroyed. That beast was a large dark red dog. Its body was more than 10 meters long. But the strange thing was that on its shoulders there were 5 basin-sized heads. That's actually the Hell Divine Hound. Yan Wei said in shock. Qin Feiyang was also extremely shocked. The Hell Divine Hound was an extremely rare divine beast. That's right, it was a divine beast. Its rarity could almost be compared to a divine dragon. The Hell Divine Hound was ferocious by nature and had an innate talent. It was known as the Guardian of Hell. Previously, he had only seen it in ancient books. This was the first time he had seen the true appearance of the Hell Divine Hound. However, Chapter 1166. That person was thin and had a hooked nose. His eyes were like those of an eagle, shining with a sharp light. He was extremely powerful. That infernal divine hound had the strength of a 7-star battle saint, but he was not at a disadvantage. And his cultivation level was only a 5-star battle saint. How did he do it? Looking at the man and the beast, Yan Wei's rough face was full of disbelief. A 5-star battle saint against a 7-star battle saint. This was a difference of 2 small realms. Why did his cultivation level advance so quickly? But Qin Feiyang was muttering to himself. His tone was full of disbelief. You know him? Yan Wei asked. Qin Feiyang said, Yes, I know him. He was once the strongest king in He province, Tan Wu. Tan Wu? Yan Wei was suspicious. I clearly remember that when I first saw him in the 9 Nether Yellow Springs, he was only a 2-star battle saint. Only a few years have passed, and he has already stepped into the 5-star battle saint. Qin Feiyang whispered. Yan Wei asked, What about your cultivation level at that time? Qin Feiyang said, My cultivation level at that time was an 8-star battle emperor. Then, did he open the gate of potential? Yan Wei said, Definitely not. If he did, with his character, he definitely wouldn't hide it from us. Moreover, he should be in the Divine Palace now. Why is he in He province? Qin Feiyang whispered. Hearing you say that, it is indeed a little strange. Although you were only an 8-star battle emperor at that time, you opened the gate of potential, and your cultivation speed is far from his. But now, you have broken through to 6-star battle saint, and he has also broken through to 5-star battle saint. I think there must be some kind of mystery behind this. Yan Wei said. Gate of potential. Qin Feiyang said word by word. Yes. Yan Wei nodded. Qin Feiyang's eyes trembled. If that was the case, didn't that mean that Tan Wu was also related to Lu Xingqian? Roar. Rumble. Tan Wu and the Hellhound's fierce battle gradually entered a white-hot stage. They did notice that Qin Feiyang and Qin Feiyang seemed to only have each other in their eyes. This Tan Wu is really not simple. There's a difference of 2 whole minor realms, and he's actually able to be equally matched with the underworld Divine Hound. Yan Wei was amazed. Qin Feiyang said, Of course he's not simple. Otherwise, I wouldn't have tried so hard to recruit him. Yan Wei was bewildered. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice, Look above his head. Yan Wei focused his gaze and looked over. He saw a palm-sized ancient peak, floating above Tan Wu's head. Its entire body was pitch black like ink, emitting a strong black light. That Gu Feng is his battle soul. As for his fighting soul, it can release an obscure force and form a gravitational realm. Any living being that enters this gravity domain will have their speed suppressed. Qin Feiyang said. Gravity domain. Yan Wei's body shook as he said in surprise, Isn't this similar to the gravity divine iron? Yes, this is also the reason why I want to subdue him. Qin Feiyang nodded. I didn't expect the great Qin Empire to have so many peerless geniuses. Yan Wei shook his head and muttered, his face full of shock. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed slightly as he said in a low voice, Take them down! Okay. Yan Wei nodded. Boom! He used the Sky Demon 9 steps and crossed half a mile in one step. At the same time, the aura of the Sky Demon 9 steps erupted, causing the void and earth here to shake violently. Tan Wu and the Hellhound were shocked when they heard the commotion. They immediately stopped fighting and looked at Yan Wei. What a powerful aura! He's a war emperor. The man and beast's expressions changed immediately. Boom! Yan Wei took a second step, and the aura around his body rose steadily. At this moment, in the eyes of Tan Wu and the Hellhound, Yan Wei was like a war god descending. Every step he took could cause heaven and earth to tremble. Suddenly, Tan Wu noticed Qin Feiyang behind Yan Wei, and his eyes widened. Is it an illusion? He rubbed his eyes in disbelief and looked again, only to see that Qin Feiyang was still standing there. It wasn't an illusion. It was really Qin Feiyang. But why was he in He Province? Tan Wu's face was full of doubts and was about to greet Qin Feiyang. But at this moment, Yan Wei took his 9th step and instantly landed above him and the Hellhound. The Emperor's aura was earth-shattering. At this moment, the man and beast both felt the aura of death. Woo woo! The Hellhound's body went limp and it quickly crawled on the ground, wailing at Yan Wei continuously. Tan Wu's heart was also drowned by fear. His current strength was not bad, but facing a war emperor it was still too far away. Just as the man and beast thought that they were dead for sure, Yan Wei suddenly stopped. That shocking killing intent firmly locked onto the man and wolf. Swish! It was also at this time that Qin Feiyang took a step forward and walked in front of Tan Wu step by step. Tan Wu glanced at Qin Feiyang, then looked at Yan Wei and asked in surprise, "Brother Qin, what's going on?" Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "He's my man." "Your man?" Tan Wu was slightly taken aback, then could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Although he and Qin Feiyang did not have a deep relationship, based on Qin Feiyang's previous attitude, it should not be disadvantageous to him. However, this sigh of his had yet to completely die down when Qin Feiyang raised his arm, grabbed his clothes, and directly tore them to shreds. Tan Wu was immediately startled, both hands protecting his chest. Qin Feiyang's gaze turned dark, and he shouted, "Put your hands down for me!" Although Tan Wu covered in time, he still caught the shadow of the potential imprint. Tan Wu's eyes had a hint of panic as he pretended to be calm and said, "Brother Qin, what are you doing?" "I asked you to put it down, didn't you hear?" Qin Feiyang roared, a hint of intense killing intent even flickering in his eyes. Tan Wu's gaze trembled, but in the end he let out a long sigh and lowered his hands. A dark gold potential imprint immediately appeared in Qin Feiyang's line of sight. Really didn't expect it. Qin Feiyang looked at the potential imprint and shook his head in self-mockery. Tan Wu hurriedly said, "Brother Qin, listen to my explanation." "What's there to explain? Do you remember what conditions I offered when I asked you to follow me?" Qin Feiyang said, "Help me open the door of potential." Tan Wu said, "Yes, but at that time you refused. Since then, I have always thought that you are a person with backbone and dignity. However, I didn't expect that you would actually become Lu Xingqin's lackey." Qin Feiyang reprimanded, his face full of disappointment. Lu Xingqin's lackey? But hearing Qin Feiyang's words, not only was Tan Wu not ashamed at all, but he got up with a suspicious look. Seeing this, Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and said, "Do you dare to say that you didn't join Lu Xingqin?" "Why should I join him?" Tan Wu asked back. "In order to open the door of potential," Qin Feiyang shouted. Tan Wu hurriedly stretched out his hand and said, "Wait, what do you mean by this? Why don't I understand at all?" Yan Wei frowned and said through voice transmission, "Look at him. It seems that it's not what you think." Qin Feiyang couldn't help but frown. Could it be that he misunderstood Tan Wu? Tan Wu opening the door of potential had nothing to do with Lu Xingqin? But that wasn't right. apart from Lu Xingqian. Who else in the great Qin Empire had the ability to help Tan Wu open the door of potential? If Tan Wu opened the door of potential with his own ability, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. Because in the great Qin Empire, there were many people with better talent, comprehension, and aptitude than Tan Wu. If others couldn't do it, why could he do it? Or was Tan Wu acting now to cover up the truth? After thinking about it, Qin Feiyang really couldn't make a judgment and asked, "Then tell me, how did you open the door of potential?" Tan Wu shook his head and said, "I can't say, but I can guarantee that it has nothing to do with Lu Xingqian." "Guarantee?" Qin Feiyang smiled coldly and said, "Do you know? Right now, Lu Xingqian is my must-kill target. Do you think that I'll easily believe you? What's the situation? Isn't your relationship with him very good? Why would he become your must-kill target?" Tan Wu was bewildered. Qin Feiyang couldn't find the slightest trace of pretense in his eyes and expression. If Tan Wu was really acting now, then his acting skills were really too good. But if Tan Wu was not acting, then who helped him open this door of potential? Really not saying? Qin Feiyang asked once more. Tan Wu said, "I promised him I really can't say." A wave of viciousness immediately surged from between Qin Feiyang's brows. Grabbing Tan Wu's neck, he shouted, "I think highly of you, but it doesn't mean that I won't kill you. Don't challenge my patience. Even if you kill me, I won't tell you." Tan Wu shook his head without the slightest cowardice. Qin Feiyang burned with rage. Yan Wei suddenly reached his hand out, grabbed Qin Feiyang's shoulder, and transmitted his voice. "Don't be anxious, I've thought of a way." "What way?" Qin Feiyang secretly thought. "Can't your slavery seal peek into the other party's thoughts? You'll enslave him now. When he's thinking about this question in his heart, you'll naturally be able to get the answer." Yan Wei secretly thought. "That's right. Why didn't I think of it?" Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. Tan Wu did not know that his slavery seal had this kind of ability, so he definitely would not be on guard. With this thought in mind, Qin Feiyang did not hesitate anymore, forming seals with both hands. A slavery seal instantly appeared out of nowhere. Following closely, with a wave of his hand, the slavery seal tore through the void and swept into the top of Tan Wu's head. "Ah!" Tan Wu immediately hugged his head and cried out in pain. But the excruciating pain in his head disappeared very quickly. Tan Wu sized himself up and looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise and asked, "What did you do to me?" Qin Feiyang did not answer and said, "I'll ask you one last time. Who is it that helped you open the door of potential?" Under normal circumstances, when being interrogated by others, one would instinctively think of this question in their mind. And Qin Feiyang wanted to seize this opportunity to figure out the truth. "Don't force me, I really can't tell you." Tan Wu shook his head again, but in his heart he was sighing, puzzled. "Old Senior Qin, since you're so concerned about Qin Feiyang, then why don't you let him know all of this?" "Old Senior Qin." Qin Feiyang's gaze trembled slightly. Chapter 1167. Who was Old Senior Qin? Why didn't he know that there was such a person who possessed the pill to unlock the door of potential? No. Old Senior Qin? Surname Qin. Could it be that this person was a certain old senior of the Qin clan? But thinking about it, it didn't seem right. If it was really a certain old senior of the Qin clan, then they would definitely take it out to nurture the descendants of the Qin clan. But since young, he had never seen a potential pill in the imperial palace. Old Senior Qin. Old Senior Qin. Could it be that Old Senior Qin who guarded the pagoda? But immediately after, he denied this thought. If it was really that Old Senior Qin, then the emperor must also know about the existence of the potential pill. Qin Feiyang was puzzled. Suddenly, he grabbed Tan Wu's clothes again and shouted, "Who is the Old Senior Qin you're thinking of?" And Tan Wu was extremely surprised. How did Qin Feiyang know what he was thinking? Didn't you want to know what I did to you just now? I'll tell you now, that's an enslavement seal. After being controlled by the enslavement seal, I can peek into your inner thoughts through the enslavement seal. Qin Feiyang said solemnly. There's actually such a thing. Tan Wu turned pale with fright. Say it quickly, Qin Feiyang shouted. His patience was about to be worn out. Looking at Qin Feiyang's current appearance, Tan Wu fell into a struggle. Should he tell Qin Feiyang or not? Old Senior Qin, at the same time, Yan Wei was also thinking about this problem. Suddenly, a look of surprise crawled up his face as he looked at Qin Feiyang and said, I heard from Fatso and the rest that you seem to have a relative called Qin Yuan, right? Qin Feiyang nodded. Yan Wei guessed. Do you think this old Senior Qin could be him? Qin Feiyang's body and mind trembled. Was it Uncle Yuan? He hurriedly looked at Tan Wu. If this person was really Uncle Yuan, then hearing Yan Wei's words now, Tan Wu's expression would have some changes. When he looked at Tan Wu, he shockingly discovered that Tan Wu was currently looking at Yan Wei. Furthermore, the gaze in his eyes clearly became different. There was a hint of helplessness and blame in his voice, as if he was blaming Yan Wei for talking too much. It's really Uncle Yuan. Qin Feiyang's body trembled. Uncle Yuan actually possessed a pill that could open the door to potential? This was hard for him to accept. All of a sudden, he raised his other arm, his two hands forcefully grabbing the clothes on Tan Wu's chest as he shouted, Tell me, is it Uncle Yuan or not? Tan Wu's gaze flickered. A moment later, he sighed deeply and nodded. It's him. Qin Feiyang's mind buzzed. Immediately, he quivered abruptly and asked, Where is Uncle Yuan right now? I don't know. Tan Wu shook his head. Qin Feiyang roared, He already helped you open the door to potential. How can you not know? Not only did old Senior Qin help me open the door to potential, he even helped me raise my cultivation. But this was a very long time ago. Where he is now, I really don't know. Tan Wu said helplessly. Qin Feiyang's eyes could not help being filled with disappointment. Letting go of Tan Wu powerlessly, he said, Why did he help you open the door to potential? Old Senior Qin knows that you think very highly of me, so he came to find me, asking me to assist you in the future. Frankly speaking, I really envy you. Although you were deserted by everyone back then, there are two people who have always been silently concerned about you. These two people are your mother and old Senior Qin, especially old Senior Qin. Although he didn't meet you these few years, he has always been paying attention to your situation. Furthermore, for your future development, he has even been secretly helping you nurture a force. Tan Wu said, Mother, Uncle Yuan. Qin Feiyang lowered his head and muttered. Gradually, his face brimmed with a happy smile. That's right, he was not alone, because no matter what happened, Uncle Yuan and his mother would not leave him. Furthermore, he even had an additional group of companions by his side now. Qin Feiyang raised his head, looked at Tan Wu and asked, What force? At that time, he just mentioned it in passing. I don't know the details either, but from his words, I can tell that this force is still growing right now. When the day comes when it grows up, this force will definitely shock heaven and earth, making ghosts and gods weep. Tan Wu said, his eyes filled with confidence. Qin Feiyang frowned and said, You're one of them? Sort of. Tan Wu nodded. Uncle Yuan, thank you. Qin Feiyang looked at the horizon and muttered. Actually, he already knew long ago that Uncle Yuan had always been paying attention to him. But the matter of helping him nurture a force, if Tan Wu did not say, he would probably still be kept in the dark. And Uncle Yuan doing this was also completely for his sake. Because if he knew about these things, he would definitely develop a reliance heart. With reliance, he would definitely become lazy. Qin Feiyang retracted his gaze, looked at Tan Wu and asked, In the past, I invited you time and time again, but you refused. Why did you suddenly agree to assist me now? Forced by the situation. Seeing everyone get stronger day by day, while I'm still making progress in the same place, I feel anxious. The other factor is Old Senior Chin. Old Senior Chin is a person of virtue and prestige, someone I admire. Don't think that I'm following you. Actually, I'm following Old Senior Chin. Tan Wu said with a smile. Qin Feiyang shook his head helplessly and said, "Looks like in your eyes, I still don't have the qualifications for you to follow." "You can say that." Tan Wu nodded. Veins immediately popped out on Qin Feiyang's forehead, and he said, "Aren't you afraid of offending me?" Tan Wu smiled and said, "Are you that kind of petty person?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled, removing the slavery seal. He believed in Uncle Yuan's vision. Since he was nurturing Tan Wu, then he definitely trusted Tan Wu 100%. However, Uncle Yuan grasping the medicinal pill to open the door of potential was truly somewhat beyond his expectations. This old man, he could not see through him more and more. Qin Feiyang shook his head, restrained his emotions, and asked Tan Wu, "Weren't you at the temple? Why did you return to He Province? Isn't it because of it?" Tan Wu pointed at the Hell Divine Hound. Qin Feiyang glanced at the Hell Divine Hound and asked suspiciously, "What do you mean?" "This has to start from a long time ago. I believe you guys must have heard of the legend of the Devil Dragon Mountain Range." Tan Wu said. Qin Feiyang, two people nodded. Tan Wu smiled and said, "But there's a legend that you guys definitely don't know." "What legend?" The two people were suspicious. Tan Wu said, "Legend has it that in the deepest part of the Devil Dragon Mountain Range, there's a peerless divine weapon hidden. As long as you obtain this divine weapon, you will definitely be like a carp leaping over the dragon gate, soaring to the heavens in one go." Peerless divine weapon. Qin Feiyang, two people looked at each other. If it was in the past, they definitely wouldn't believe it. Because things like divine weapons were too ethereal, it was impossible for them to exist in this world. But now they firmly believed it. Because Rin Duxing's battle sword was obtained here. Yan Wei said, "I really didn't hear about this legend in the capital." Tan Wu smiled faintly and said, "Only a few people in He Province know about this legend. They definitely won't be able to find out about it." Qin Feiyang asked, "Then what does this legend have to do with the Hell Divine Hound?" "Of course. Back then, when I stepped into the One-Star Battle Sect, I entered the Devil Dragon Mountain Range to verify the authenticity of this legend. However, when I came to the Devil Dragon Mountain Range, I realized how naive and childish I was. There are too many fierce beasts here, and they were too strong. It wasn't a place that I could set foot in at all. But I didn't want to give up. I desperately walked towards the depths and finally came here with great difficulty. And when I came here, I was already seriously injured. Just as I was about to find a place to recuperate for a period of time, this damn dog suddenly jumped out and almost took my life." Tan Wu looked at the Hell Divine Hound, his eyes filled with a cold light. "TSK, that's because you overestimated your own abilities. With your little cultivation back then, you still dared to go so deep. If this Emperor doesn't kill you, who will I kill?" The Hell Divine Hound said disdainfully. Tan Wu said angrily, "Then you can't take advantage of others' difficulties, right?" "After all, you're a divine beast. A divine beast must be magnanimous." "Who said that divine beasts should be magnanimous?" "This Emperor likes to take advantage of people's difficulties. How about it? Not convinced? Come, let's fight again." The Hell Divine Hound clamored. Qin Feiyang's face twitched as he glanced at the Hell Divine Hound. How could this guy be on par with the white-eyed wolf? He turned to look at Tan Wu and asked curiously, "Then what happened after that? How did you escape from its hands?" "After that, it teased me in every way possible and humiliated me. Of course, I refused to accept it. so I arranged a battle with it. When I broke through to the Battle Saint realm, I'll come and find it for a fair battle. If I win, it will submit to me. If I lose, I'll be its human pet. I originally thought that it wouldn't agree, but who knew if its brain had a cramp, it actually agreed. Tan Wu said disdainfully. The Hell Divine Hound was immediately enraged and roared. This emperor spared your dog life. It's fine if you don't thank this emperor, but you actually scolded this emperor in public? Kid, let me tell you, don't be too arrogant. Idiot. Tan Wu rolled his eyes at it and looked at Qin Feng, saying, half a month ago, I broke through to the 5-star Battle Saint realm and found an excuse to return to He province to find it for a battle. The result is that you all saw it. My strength and its are considered evenly matched. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang came to a realization. Yan Wei sized up Tan Wu and the Hell Divine Hound and said strangely, why do I feel that the relationship between the two of you isn't so simple? It seems like there's a kind of enemy, love, and hate. Qin Feiyang smiled and said, we're enemies. The Hell Divine Hound said angrily, don't talk nonsense. This emperor is a divine beast with a noble bloodline. How can I love and hate a mere human? Tan Wu snorted coldly and said, I also disdain to be enemies with you. What do you mean? Have I wronged you? The Hell Divine Hound immediately glared at Tan Wu angrily. No, it's me who's unworthy. Tan Wu said indifferently. It's good that you know your place. The Hell Divine Hound sneered. Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei looked at each other, shook their heads, and laughed. This man and beast were clearly enemies. It seemed that when Tan Wu was tortured by the Hell Divine Hound, many interesting things happened. Otherwise, this scene wouldn't have appeared now. Suddenly, Qin Feiyang's face turned solemn. Looking at the man and beast, he asked, how long have you guys been fighting here? Tan Wu said, it should be 10 days. Already fighting for 10 days in a row, and you still say it's not love and hate? Yan Wei rolled his eyes. Hearing that, Tan Wu and the Hell Divine Hound's expressions both appeared somewhat embarrassed. Chapter 1168. These shadows were none other than Rin Duxing and the others. Tan Wu raised his head and glanced at them. He shook his head and said, I've never seen them before. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows. The Magic Dragon Mountain Range is vast and boundless. They might not pass by here, and I guess that they should have teleported there directly. Yan Wei said, teleport there? Qin Feiyang frowned. Rin Duxing once entered the Magic Dragon Mountain Range and obtained a peerless divine sword. Now that Mu Tianyang has taken over his body, he definitely knows the coordinates of the deeper parts. Yan Wei said, makes sense. Qin Feiyang nodded and said in a deep voice, then there's no time to lose. Let's continue on our way. Yan Wei nodded. With a wave of his hand, he swept up Qin Feiyang and rushed towards the depths of the mountain range. Peerless divine sword. Possession. Listening to the conversation between the two, Tan Wu's face was full of suspicion. What was going on? Wait for me. Seeing that Qin Feiyang was about to disappear at the end of the mountain range, Tan Wu quivered and hurriedly shouted at the two of them, chasing after them. The Hell God Hound was stunned for a moment before chasing after them. At the same time, hearing Tan Wu's voice, Yan Wei turned to look at Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and nodded to Yan Wei. Yan Wei immediately slowed down. Not long later, Tan Wu chased after them and asked suspiciously, where are you guys going? Yan Wei said, the deepest part of the Magic Dragon Mountain Range. Tan Wu's eyes lit up and said, can you bring me along? I've long wanted to go deeper to take a look. This, Yan Wei hesitated. Qin Feiyang frowned. It's very dangerous, and we might not even be able to return. It's fine. Anyway, you're here. If we encounter any danger, just let me go to the castle. Tan Wu smiled and said. Qin Feiyang smiled helplessly and said, I'm just afraid that I won't have the chance to send you to the castle. Is it that dangerous? Tan Wu was bewildered. Life is unpredictable. Who knows? Qin Feiyang said. That at this moment, the Cerberus also caught up. It looked at Qin Feiyang and asked, "Can you take me with you?" Ugh! Qin Feiyang was astonished. Aren't you afraid of death? The Hell God Hound said disdainfully. TSK, am I the kind of person who is afraid of death? You're a dog, not a human. Tan Wu rolled his eyes. Woof! The Hell Divine Hound immediately opened its bloody maw and pounced towards Tan Wu. Yan Wei shook his head and smiled. With them accompanying me, I won't be too lonely. Qin Feiyang couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. Whoosh! Yan Wei brought 2 people and 1 beast and turned into a stream of light, rushing into the depths like lightning. Brother Qin, why did you say that I joined Lu Xingqian just now? And what peerless divine sword? What possession? What Mu Tianyang? What's going on? At the same time, He State City. To the east of the city, there was a desolate canyon. At this moment, one figure after another descended in the sky above the canyon. The leader was a white-haired old man. It was the Imperial Preceptor. Behind the Imperial Preceptor was a group of black-clothed people. There were men and women, old and young. On their chests, there was an extremely eye-catching black skull symbol. Whoosh! Just as the Imperial Preceptor and the others appeared, 2 figures rushed out of the canyon and landed in front of the Imperial Preceptor. They bowed and said, "Greetings, Lord." Of these 2 people, one was an old man, the other was a middle-aged man. The old man was the previous prefecture chief of his state. The middle-aged man was the current prefecture chief that Qin Feiyang met in the city. And this canyon was where the teleportation altar of his state was located. Very few people knew about it. The Imperial Preceptor looked at the 2 people and asked, "Where is Qin Feiyang?" The middle-aged man said, "He was in the city not long ago, but I don't know where he is now." The State Preceptor's face immediately became filled with a vicious aura that couldn't be dispelled. He gloomily said, "Qin Feiyang is a serious criminal in the capital. You saw him, yet you didn't apprehend him in time and instead allowed him to leave. Do you know that this State Preceptor can sentence you to death right now?" "Spare me, Lord." The middle-aged man trembled and hurriedly knelt in the void to beg for mercy. He was also bitter in his heart. Even the people in the capital couldn't do anything to Qin Feiyang, let alone his state. But in the face of the Imperial Preceptor's obscene power, he could only endure silently. "Why aren't you investigating? I want to know where he is in an hour. Otherwise, bring your heads to me." The Imperial Preceptor looked at the 2 people and shouted. Yes, the 2 people responded respectfully. They immediately opened the teleportation gate and appeared in the sky above the city. "How do we find him?" The middle-aged man looked at the old man helplessly. "Calm down. There must be a way." The old man pondered for a moment and asked, "Does Qin Feiyang have any accomplices?" There is a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's eyes suddenly trembled as he said in surprise, "Yes, it's him." The old man was puzzled. The middle-aged man said, "I saw him fly up from the city and whisper to Qin Feiyang. They should be asking about something." The old man was delighted and said, "This is a clue. Quickly bring people to investigate." "Okay." The middle-aged man nodded and immediately turned to leave. In less than an hour he returned and said to the old man, "I found it. That middle-aged man is in a restaurant asking for the coordinates of the magical Dragon Mountain Range." "They are going to the magical Dragon Mountain Range?" The old man was surprised. "Should be right." The middle-aged man nodded. The old man said in panic, "This is not good. Tan Wu is now in the magical Dragon Mountain Range." "What? When did that kid come back?" The middle-aged man was surprised. "More than 10 days ago. It seems to be for that hellhound. The old man said. The middle-aged man said angrily, This brat is too willful. Quickly inform him to be careful of Qin Feiyang. The old man nodded and took out the image crystal. Even the hellhound knew about it. It could be seen that the relationship between these two people and Tan Wu was not shallow. At the same time, Magical Dragon Mountain Range. Qin Feiyang and the others were flying above a forest as fast as lightning. Stop! Tan Wu suddenly shouted. Yan Wei braked and stopped in the air. He turned to look at Tan Wu suspiciously and asked, What's wrong? Tan Wu said, Someone sent me a message. You guys retreat. Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei looked at each other and quickly retreated to the side. Humans are really troublesome. The hellhound muttered in dissatisfaction and also retreated to Qin Feiyang and Yan Wei's side. Tan Wu took out the image crystal. Buzz! The image of the old man appeared. Greetings, master. Tan Wu immediately bowed. The old man asked, Are you still in the Magical Dragon Mountain Range? Yes. Tan Wu nodded. The old man said, Then how is the battle with the hellhound going? Tan Wu smiled bitterly and said, Its cultivation has also become stronger. It is now a 7-star battle saint. If it continues, it should be a situation where both sides suffer. To be able to fight it to a draw in such a short period of time, you are not bad. The old man smiled, his face full of gratification. Then his face turned serious, and he said in a deep voice, You have to be careful these few days. What's wrong? Tan Wu asked. The old man said, according to this old man's inquiry, Qin Feiyang may have also entered the Magical Dragon Mountain Range. Tan Wu was slightly stunned. He glanced at Qin Feiyang, who was not far away, and pretended to be surprised. He looked at the old man and asked, Why did Qin Feiyang come to the Magical Dragon Mountain Range? I don't know. But now the Imperial Tutor has personally led people into our province. He will definitely enter the Magical Dragon Mountain Range later. If you have nothing else, it's better to come back as soon as possible. The old man said. Imperial Tutor. Tan Wu's eyes focused, and he nodded. Understood, this disciple will be careful. That's good. It's not easy for a genius like you to appear in our province. This old man doesn't want to die prematurely. The old man said with a smile. Tan Wu smiled and said, Don't worry, this disciple knows his limits. Yes. The old man nodded, and the shadow quickly dissipated. Tan Wu also put away the image crystal and turned to look at Qin Feiyang and said, What do we do now? The Imperial Tutor personally brought people here. This was not a small matter and had to be treated carefully. Humph! This old thing. He won't be satisfied until he kills me. Qin Feiyang snorted coldly. The hell god hound hesitated and said that. This emperor wants to ask, is that Imperial Tutor very strong? Nonsense. He's the teacher of the current emperor. Do you think he's strong or not? Tan Wu rolled his eyes at it. Then how strong is he? If he's not that strong, we'll think of a way to kill him directly. The Hell God Hound said. Qin Feiyang and the other two looked at each other. He actually wanted to kill the Imperial Tutor? This guy was really a newborn calf that was not afraid of a tiger. Tan Wu said, Listen carefully, the current Imperial Tutor is a false god. What? A false god? The Hell God Hound's eyes widened, filled with shock. Tan Wu said, Let's talk about it now. Do you still want to kill him? Just pretend that you didn't hear what I said just now. The Hell God Hound laughed dryly. What a joke. Wasn't it courting death to provoke a false god? Tan Wu rolled his eyes and looked at Qin Feiyang, saying, If I'm caught by the Imperial Tutor, I'm fine, but you'll definitely be doomed. If he wants to catch me, it won't be that simple. Qin Feiyang's eyes flickered. What do you mean? Tan Wu was suspicious. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile, Actually, the Imperial Tutor's arrival is exactly what I'm looking forward to. What do you mean? Tan Wu was surprised. After Rin Duxing was possessed by a wisp of Mu Tianyang's divine consciousness, his methods are very terrifying. With the strength of the few of us, it's not enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. Therefore, I need someone stronger to deal with him, and this Imperial Tutor is undoubtedly the best candidate. Qin Feiyong sneered, a cold light flashing in his eyes. Yan Wei suddenly said, I understand. Your goal is to let them fight each other. Yes. If I didn't want people to know my whereabouts, I wouldn't have stood there openly in the capital of He Province. And I wouldn't have let you directly use your true face to inquire about the coordinates of the demonic Dragon Mountain Range. Qin Feiyong said. I see. Yan Wei suddenly understood, shook his head and said with a smile, You deliberately left clues to let them find our whereabouts, and then led them to the demonic Dragon Mountain Range. Qin Feiyong smiled faintly and said, These two people are not good people. Let them fight first, and then we'll come out and reap the benefits in the end. Brilliant. Tan Wu gave a thumbs up. As soon as he entered He Province, he began to make arrangements. It seemed that this person was already unwilling to be a chess piece. It was really exciting. We'll see a good show soon. Let's go. Qin Feiyong said with a smile. Yan Wei also smiled playfully and continued on his way with 2 people and 1 beast. At the same time, outside the capital in the canyon, Tan Wu's master also told the Imperial Tutor about Qin Feiyong's whereabouts. Chapter 1169. Time flew. Night fell again. The demonic Dragon Mountain Range was particularly quiet at night. Only the occasional sound of insects could be heard. Whoosh! A stream of light cut through the sky and landed on a mountain peak. It was Qin Feiyong and his group. After landing on the mountain peak, the group immediately turned around and looked at the void behind them. From afar, they could faintly see a blurry light figure rapidly approaching them. Yan Wei frowned. Why is there only one person? Is it not the Imperial Tutor? Qin Feiyong's eyes flickered as he whispered, The demonic Dragon Mountain Range is so big they don't know where we are going. They will definitely split up to find us. While they were talking, that light figure was getting closer and closer. Qin Feiyong and the rest also restrained their auras to the extreme. Finally, Qin Feiyong saw the person's true face. It was a middle-aged man with thick eyebrows and big eyes. He had a strong body and was 9 meters tall. The aura exuding from his body was extremely strong. Can you see through his cultivation? Tan Wu asked. Yan Wei shook his head. No. Qin Feiyong suddenly said. His cultivation is definitely not lower than a 5-star combat emperor. What? The 2 men and 1 beast's expression changed. Swoosh! Qin Feiyong waved his hand and led the 2 men and 1 beast into the ancient castle. Not long after they entered the ancient castle, the middle-aged man did not stop at all and swept across the sky above the mountain peak. Inside the ancient castle, hello everyone. Tan Wu smiled and greeted Fatso and the rest, other than the double-winged snow eagle, Yan Wei, Phantom Snake Emperor, Viper, and Dan Wonkai. Everyone was considered old acquaintances. So Fatso and the rest also smiled and nodded at Tan Wu. So strong. When he noticed Viper and Dan Wonkai, Tan Wu's pupils constricted slightly. Then he looked at Qin Feiyong and asked, They are also your subordinates. Friends, Qin Feiyong said. Tan Wu was slightly taken aback and said emotionally, Your foundation is getting stronger and stronger. Qin Feiyong sighed. It's a pity that my own strength is still not enough to bring it to the table. Tan Wu smiled faintly and said, With your cultivation speed, catching up to them, even surpassing them, is just a matter of time. Qin Feiyong shook his head and smiled. Tan Wu said, Oh right, How did you determine that person's cultivation just now? The symbol on his chest. Qin Feiyang said, a cold light flashing in his eyes. Logo. Tan Wu, Yen Wei, and the Hell God Hound looked at each other. They could see a trace of doubt in each other's eyes. Qin Feiyang said, there's a black skull symbol on his chest. Tan Wu nodded. He had also noticed this. Qin Feiyang said, that's the symbol of the inner hall of the law enforcement hall. Inner hall? Tan Wu was bewildered. Having been in the Divine Hall for so long, he naturally had a good understanding of the law enforcement hall. The law enforcement hall was personally controlled by the state preceptor. Every person inside was rather powerful. And the law enforcement hall was also the place that all the disciples of the Divine Hall did not want to go to the most. Because once they entered the law enforcement hall, it would definitely be a situation of 9 deaths and 1 life. But he had never heard of the inner hall before. Those law enforcers that you usually see are only people from the outer hall. And the law enforcers of the inner hall are even more mysterious than the law enforcers of the outer hall. They never easily appear in front of people, because they are death warriors secretly groomed by the emperor and the state preceptor. Each one of them is a 1 in 10,000 ruthless character. They will only appear when there's a particularly major emergency. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. There's actually such a group of people. Tan Wu was tongue-tied. Qin Feiyang said, this muddy water in the imperial capital is deeper than you imagine. Tan Wu asked, then are they the emperor's trusted aides or the state preceptor's trusted aides? Under the heavens, all lands belong to the emperor. Logically speaking, everything in the great Qin Empire should belong to the emperor, including these law enforcers of the inner hall. In the past, I thought so too. But now, after experiencing so many things, I've changed some of my views. I feel that whether it's the people from the outer hall or the law enforcement hall, they should all be the state preceptor's trusted aides. Qin Feiyang said in a deep voice. Tan Wu said in shock, you suspect that the state preceptor wants to usurp the throne. Who knows? Qin Feiyang shrugged his shoulders. Tan Wu took a deep look at Qin Feiyang and asked, then what are the conditions to enter the inner hall? Qin Feiyang said, first of all, cultivation. The lowest is a 5-star combat emperor. Tan Wu was secretly speechless. He really did not expect that there was such a mysterious department hidden in the imperial capital. It was so strong that it made people afraid. Qin Feiyang's gaze flickered slightly. He looked at Tan Wu and said, I think you should go back. And Tan Wu raised his eyebrows. Don't misunderstand. I'm not looking down on you. I'm just afraid of implicating you. If the state preceptor finds out that you're with me, do you know what the consequences will be? Moreover, the people he brought this time are from the law enforcement hall's inner hall. I really don't have the confidence to protect your safety. Qin Feiyang said. Tan Wu's expression was uncertain. The Hell God Hound said, Hey. He's right. If you stay now, not only will you not be able to help him, you will only drag him down. Why do you care? Tan Wu glared at it angrily. The Hell God Hound snorted coldly and said, Don't be unhappy. This emperor is telling the truth. Scram! Tan Wu's face was pitch black and his veins were bulging. TSK, you don't know what's good for you. The Hell God Hound pursed its lips. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He brought Yen Wei, Tan Wu, and the Hell God Hound and left the ancient castle. At the peak of the mountain, dead silence. Qin Feiyang looked at Tan Wu and said with a faint smile, It's settled then. We'll meet again if fate allows it. Then be careful, Tan Wu warned. Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a smile, If there's a chance, when you meet Uncle Yuan, send my regards to him. Okay, Tan Wu said with a smile. Qin Feiyang turned to look at Yen Wei and said, Let's go. Yen Wei waved his hand, swept up Qin Feiyang, and disappeared from Tan Wu and the Hell God Hound's line of sight without looking back. The Hell God Hound retracted its gaze and looked at Tan Wu, asking curiously, "What's the background of this Qin Feiyang to actually alarm the current state preceptor?" Tan Wu said, "He's the current emperor's son, the 14th prince. He's known as a monster that doesn't appear in 10,000 years. Fuck! The Hell God Hound's eyes went wide, and it exclaimed, "This background isn't small. But since he's the emperor's son, why would he fall out with the emperor like this?" Tan Wu said, "You fierce beasts won't understand the matters of us humans. You're looking down on me?" The Hell God Hound was immediately enraged. "I'm looking down on you. So what?" Tan Wu looked at it provocatively. The Hell God Hound shouted, "Then stop talking nonsense. Come, come, come. Let's fight another 100 times." "I'm not in the mood now." Tan Wu rolled his eyes at it, turned around, and returned the way he came. The Hell God Hound stood up and hurriedly chased after him, saying disdainfully, "You're not angry anymore? You're too lousy." Tan Wu was silent. The Hell God Hound said, "Speak, don't pretend to be mute." "Aren't you annoying?" Tan Wu was furious. The Hell God Hound waved its paw disdainfully and said, "But then again, although Qin Feiyang has a few war emperors by his side, the people of the Law Enforcement Hall's inner hall are far stronger than them. Moreover, there's the state preceptor of Fake God. Is Qin Feiyang their match? You don't have to worry about that. I understand Qin Feiyang. If he isn't confident, he won't take the risk." Tan Wu smiled confidently. Early morning, when the first ray of sunlight shone on the Demon Dragon mountain range, everything began to gradually wake up. Roar, chirp. The roars of the fierce beasts and the sharp cries of the birds resounded in the mountain stream, echoing in the air. Whiz! Under the lead of Yan Wei, Qin Feiyang was like a meteor, streaking across the sky like lightning, disappearing into the end of the mountain range. With the state preceptors group leading the way, they almost didn't encounter any fierce beasts along the way. Even if there was, with Yan Wei's current strength, he could easily deal with it. Unknowingly, they had already entered the depths of the Demon Dragon mountain range. The fierce beasts here were even stronger, almost all of them between the 7-star War Saint and the 9-star War Saint. Occasionally, they would encounter a War Emperor-level Beast King. But even here, Qin Feiyang did not sense the mysterious power that was rumored to be able to plunder the life force of living beings. Roar! Suddenly, a War Emperor-level Beast King roared out from the mountain stream, opened its bloody mouth, and pounced towards Qin Feiyang. It was a red bull with a body of more than 100 feet, like a small mountain, ferocious and awe-inspiring. Seeing this, Yan Wei's gaze turned cold. He used the 9 steps of the demon and stepped on the bull's head. Accompanied by a loud crack, the bull's head was split into pieces on the spot. Reckless, Yan Wei snorted coldly, turned his head to look at Qin Feiyang, and said, "Shouldn't you be preparing?" "It's time to prepare." Qin Feiyang muttered to himself, and a bloody kill word instantly appeared between his eyebrows. His long hair, eyes, and even his skin were drowned in blood at a speed visible to the naked eye. Very quickly, he turned into a killing god, his murderous aura soaring to the heavens. At the same time that the kill word was activated, the blood in the bull's body crazily gushed out, continuously flowing into Qin Feiyang's forehead. In less than 3 breaths, the bull's blood was sucked dry and turned into a dried corpse. The two of them continued forward. Not long after, they saw a battlefield. The mountains and rivers were shattered, and the earth was cracked. But in the middle of the battlefield, there was a War Emperor-level Beast King lying on the ground. It was a huge black tiger, but it was already dead, its entire body dripping with blood. According to the wound, the giant tiger should have been dead for 3 to 4 hours. As for how it died, it was easy to imagine that it must have died at the hands of the inner hall's law enforcers. Although this giant tiger had the cultivation of a war emperor, its corpse was not of much value to those law enforcers, because as the law enforcers of the inner hall they had resources and wealth, so they did not care about this at all. However, to Qin Feiyang this was a great treasure. The blood in the giant tiger's body had all been absorbed by him. His aura had also become stronger and stronger, and the murderous aura that exuded from his body had also become more and more astonishing. As for whether or not the imperial tutor would discover his aura, he was not worried at all, because whether it was the imperial tutor or the law enforcers of the inner hall, they were all faster than Yanwei. Perhaps the imperial tutor and the others had already entered deeper into the magic dragon mountain range. So, Chapter 1170. While Qin Feiyang was frantically stacking his cultivation base in the deepest part of the demonic dragon mountain range, a group of people was standing in front of a huge stone stele. The one in the lead was Rin Duxing. Dongqing, Zhangjin, and the 4 sacred beasts stood respectfully on the left and right sides. The 3 people and 4 sacred beasts stared at the stone stele in front of them with heavy expressions. That stone stele was several hundred zhang tall, its entire body as white as jade. From afar, it looked like a giant sword that pierced the sky, and on the stone stele there were several lines of words. Demonic Dragon Mountain Ranges hinterland, intruders die. Every word seemed to be made of fresh blood, exuding a shocking murderous aura. Behind the stone tablet was an endless stretch of mountains and rivers. But inside the mountain range, there was no vegetation, no fierce beasts, not even a bug. There were only piles of white bones, dead silence. Zhang Jin retracted his gaze and looked respectfully at Rin Duxing, asking, "My lord, where did Dong Qing get that battle sword in her hand?" "It's here." Ren Duxing pointed at the stone stele and said. Then he leaped into the air and stood on top of the stone stele. Zhang Jin, Dong Qing, and the 4 sacred beasts exchanged a glance and also leaped into the air, landing beside Rin Duxing. Immediately, they saw a crack in the middle of the stone stele. Rin Duxing said that battle sword was stuck in that crack in the past. Dong Qing asked suspiciously, "Who left it behind?" "I don't know." Ren Duxing shook his head. Zhang Jin was puzzled. "Then why are we here this time?" Ren Duxing said, "After I escaped, I came to this place. There is a giant mountain in the depths of the hinterland, and there is a cloud of black fog floating on top of it. The aura emitted by that black fog even scared me." "What?" Zhang Jin, Dong Qing, and the 4 sacred beasts paled. "Of course, if I was at my peak, that black fog shouldn't be a threat to me." Rin Duxing said again. Zhang Jin asked, "Then did you see what was inside that black fog?" "No, I couldn't get close." Rin Duxing shook his head. "Not even this sword." With a wave of her hand, Dong Qing summoned her crimson sword. Ren Duxing said, "I've tried, but the power of the sword can only help me reach the foot of the mountain, not the peak." Dong Qing said, "Do you mean that there might be some kind of treasure at the top of the mountain?" "It's not a supreme treasure. It's a demon." Rin Duxing's eyes sparkled. "Demon?" Zhang Jin and the others looked at each other. "Yes, there is a mysterious power that can steal the life force of living beings in the hinterland. As for this power, it came from that black fog." Rin Duxing said, "Plunder the life force of living beings." Zhang Jin and the other 2, as well as the 4 saint beasts, turned pale with fright. The sacred monkey asked suspiciously, "Master, since the sword can't help us reach the peak, why are we here now?" "It didn't work in the past, but that doesn't mean it won't work now, because I now have another divine artifact in my hands." Rin Duxing said. The sacred monkey asked, "Master, are you talking about magic crystals?" "That's right. With two divine artifacts in hand, I don't believe that we can't reach the peak. Rinduxing's eyes turned cold. With a wave of his hand, he led the two people and 4 saint beasts into the hinterland. Entering the hinterland, Zhang Jin, Dongqing, and the 4 saint beasts immediately felt a mysterious power enveloping them. The life force in their bodies began to drain away immediately. Rinduxing shouted, "Give me the sword!" Dongqing waved her hand, erased the blood contract in the crimson sword, and then handed it to Rinduxing. Rinduxing grabbed the sword, cut his finger, and dripped his blood to bind it. Immediately after, a wisp of divine sense flew out from the top of his head and merged into the sword. Clang! The sword suddenly recovered, emitting a dazzling divine light, and its divine power spread in all directions. The sacred monkey's expression changed, and it hurriedly said, "Master, you can't use divine sense to recover the divine artifact." The sacred eagle also said anxiously, "Yes, you only have a wisp of divine sense. If it is consumed, you will be destroyed. Don't worry. After all these years of cultivation, my wisp of divine sense has already grown, and now it is about to condense a divine soul. It's not a problem to recover the divine artifact temporarily." Rinduxing said, "It's about to condense a divine soul." The 4 saint beasts looked at each other, overjoyed. Rinduxing looked at the peak of the giant mountain, and his eyes flashed. Clang! The sword in his hand flew out and floated above his head, buzzing and trembling. Sword chi surged, and in an instant a barrier of more than 10 feet appeared, protecting the 3 people and 4 saint beasts inside. The moment the barrier appeared, they immediately felt that the mysterious power that was robbing their life force disappeared. The hinterland of the demonic Dragon Mountain range was also very large. The group of people flew for a full hour before they saw a huge mountain peak. The giant mountain was thousands of feet tall, and it was located in the center of a plain in front of them. It was dark red, like a blood-stained magic sword, emitting a pungent smell of blood. At the foot of the giant mountain, there were piles of bones like a Jura hell. I didn't expect such a terrifying place to exist in a mere He province. Looking at the sea of bones, Zhang Jin and Dongqing swallowed their saliva, and their eyes were full of fear. Rinduxing said, "Don't underestimate any place, and in the great Qin Empire, there are more dangerous places than here." Where? The two were surprised. The Sea of Reincarnation. "Even I don't dare to set foot in that sea." Rinduxing said. The two couldn't help but gasp when they heard this. One must know, their master was a true god of war when he was alive, and even he couldn't set foot in it easily. How terrifying was the so-called Sea of Reincarnation. Most importantly, they had never heard of the Sea of Reincarnation before. Rinduxing said, "The Sea of Reincarnation is located in the extreme north of the imperial capital, and it's boundless. When there's a chance in the future, I'll take you to see it." After saying that, Rinduxing waved his hand and led the 2 men and 4 beasts to land on the ground, stepping on countless bones and walking towards the giant mountain. Zhang Jin said, "Why don't we just fly up?" "You can't fly within half a mile of the giant mountain, so you can only walk there. Look there." Rinduxing pointed to a certain place at the foot of the mountain. The 2 men and the 4 beasts looked over and saw an ancient stone staircase. It was like a giant python, winding and twisting, climbing up the giant peak, all the way to the peak. "Can't fly?" Zhang Jin raised his eyebrows and tried to fly. A terrifying gravity suddenly pressed down on him. He panicked and hurriedly returned to the ground. Rinduxing glanced at him and didn't say anything. A few hundred breaths later, the group finally arrived at the foot of the mountain. Crack! An ear-piercing crisp sound suddenly rang out. Zhang Jin, Dongqing, and the 4 sacred beasts hurriedly looked in the direction of the sound, and their expressions changed drastically. They saw that a crack had appeared on the barrier protecting them, and that terrifying, mysterious force swarmed in through the crack. They immediately felt that the vitality in their bodies was crazily draining away like running water. For a moment, Zhang Jin and Dong Qing panicked. The four sacred beasts used to be pseudo-god level existences, but at this moment their eyes were filled with fear. Rin Duxing's expression was also extremely solemn. He made a prompt decision. He took out the demon crystal and inserted a wisp of divine sense into it. Boom! The demon crystal suddenly emitted a black light and floated in the air, floating next to the red battle sword. Demonic power surged. Immediately after, wisps of black air gushed out from the demon crystal and rushed towards the crack. Although he had two divine artifacts in hand, Rin Duxing didn't dare to be careless at all, because he didn't know if these two divine artifacts could block the erosion of that mysterious force. He looked at the crack nervously. As the black air continued to pour in, the crack slowly began to shrink. However, although the crack was being repaired, he still didn't dare to take it lightly, because in this place anything could happen. Time passed breath by breath. More than 10 breaths later, the crack was finally repaired, and the surging mysterious force was blocked outside. It wasn't until this moment that Rin Duxing secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Dong Qing, Zhang Jin, and the four sacred beasts were dripping with cold sweat all over. When the crack was being repaired, they even almost collapsed. It could be seen how nervous they were. Moreover, it was in this short period of time that more than half of the vitality in their bodies was robbed by that mysterious force, and they looked very old. That was close. If that crack couldn't be repaired, I'm afraid everyone would have to die here. What the hell is that thing? Zhang Jin looked at the peak of the mountain, his face full of fear. Let's go. Ren Duxing took a deep breath, waved his hand, and took the lead to step on the stone stairs and walked up. Zhang Jin, Dong Qing, and the four sacred beasts quickly followed. At this time, if they left the protection of the barrier, they would die. In another place, the National Master stood on the peak of a giant mountain looking around. His heart was in a mess, and his eyes were gloomy to the extreme. This place was not far from the deepest part of the magical Dragon Mountain range. Suddenly, he raised his hand and waved, and a wave of false god power surged into the sky and then exploded like fireworks. Whoosh! Soon, a man in black came through the air and landed in front of the National Master. How is it? The National Master asked. The man in black shook his head and said, I didn't find anything. Whoosh! Before his voice died away, another man in black came from another direction and landed on the peak of the mountain. The state preceptor patiently asked, Do you have any clues? I'm incompetent. The man in black lowered his head and said, Although there was no direct answer, it was enough to explain everything. Whoosh! Following closely, the other law enforcers also came to join them. The answer was no. Where did that little bastard go? The National Master was annoyed. An old man in black said, Could he have left the magical Dragon Mountain range through the portal? Left? The National Master raised his eyebrows. This possibility couldn't be ruled out. After pondering for a moment, he waved his hand and shouted, Continue to go deeper. The old man in black said, Sir, if we continue to search blindly like this, we might be wasting time. The National Master looked at the old man in black and said expressionlessly, Haven't you noticed that this mountain range is not simple? Not simple? The old man in black frowned. The National Master said in a deep voice, Amir province has so many battle sage and battle emperor level beasts. Isn't there something fishy about this? That's right. The beasts here are indeed ridiculously strong. After being reminded by the National Master, the law enforcers finally reacted. There should be some secret hidden in the deepest part of the magical Dragon Mountain range, and Qin Feiyang should have entered the magical Dragon Mountain range for this. So, no matter where he is hiding now, as long as we get there first, he won't be able to escape. Unless he has really left, the National Master said. Everyone nodded. Whoosh! Following closely, you're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.